Here we go. Well, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Tuesday, December 16, 2014 meeting of the Edina City Council and the Edina Housing and Redevelopment Authority. Roll call, please, Ms. Mangan.
Member Bennett.
Here.
Member Brindle.
Here.
Member Sprague.
Here.
Member Swenson.
Here.
Mayor Hovland.
Here. Council members, we have in front of us this evening a form of meeting agenda. We need to do a little bit of modifying to it. Under 5B, the presenter, Jordan Gilgenbach, is ill, and so we're going to pull item 5B, and then I'm going to substitute in there, under special recognitions and presentations, recognition of Joni Bennett and Josh Sprague, our departing colleagues and council members here. So let's, with that change to the, with those two changes to the agenda, is there a motion to adopt the agenda?
So moved. Second.
We got a motion and a second to adopt the agenda as amended.
May I make just one, I'll give it a heads up. Brian Grogan will be coordinating the public hearing tonight regarding cable television. He's appearing right now at the Hopkins City Council meeting and doing that same presentation. So if all things go according to plan, he'll be walking in here right before it's time to open that public hearing here. But in case he's not, we should open that and table it and come back to it when he arrives.
All right. Okay. We've got a motion and a second to adopt the amended agenda for the evening. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed say nay. Carried. Next thing on the agenda is the items on the consent portion of the agenda. Anyone on the council wish to remove an item from the consent agenda?
Yes.
Member Bennett.
Thank you. I would like to remove items 4J and 4K, please.
4J, 4K. Anyone else? All right. With the exception of 4J and 4K, is there a motion to adopt the balance of the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second.
We've got a motion and a second to adopt the consent agenda with the exclusion of items 4J and 4K. Further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed say nay. Carried. And then to 4J. Member Bennett.
Yes, thank you. When we have considered sidewalk construction in the past, I know that there has been reference to retaining walls being built on the adjacent property owner's property. And I'm also clear that with the construction of the 9 Mile Creek Trail, it's Three Rivers Park District's plan to again construct the fencing or the screening that different residents have requested that was part of that construction plan, that those fences or screening will be constructed on the property owner's property so that the long-term maintenance of those things will be at the expense of the property owner. Can someone explain to me what is different here?
Mr. Mayor?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think
You can try it, and then
I can, actually.
the city attorney can as well.
I'm going to defer this one to our city attorney because this is a unique case, but we may be seeing more of these cases in the future as a result of an action in the courts. So, Mr. Knutson,
I think
could
there's
you?
a Court of Appeals decision on this matter that caused us to go a certain direction.
I just drank it.
Roger.
Mayor, I think you could, you just summarized it. There was a Court of Appeals decision involving the city of Minneapolis, I lose track of time, within the last year, which basically said if a retaining wall is needed because of a sidewalk, a grade of a sidewalk or grade of a street, any public improvement, it's the obligation of the city to maintain it. It doesn't matter whether it's on private property or public property.
And then the differentiation with the 9 Mile Creek Trail would be that the screening and fencing that's being discussed in conjunction with that plan is not necessitated by grade. It is occasioned by the property owner, adjacent property owner's desires for relative amounts of privacy, more or less. Would that be the differentiation?
Yes, that's a privacy. That's not a retaining wall as the term is used. A retaining wall is because of the grade.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. In conjunction with this matter, I actually met with the plaintiff for the Minneapolis case.
I don't think so.
Yeah, I'm not sure, but
in that
she
part
was
of town, yeah.
she was at this residence. I can tell you that.
Sure.
And anyway, Member Bennett, you want to move the matter
I
with that
will
explanation?
move the matter.
All right.
Second.
Is there a second? We got a motion and a second to approve the easement agreement on 4420 Grimes Avenue. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed say nay. Carried. And then the next one was 4K. That's the request to waive building permit fees for the Braemar Clubhouse renovation project. Member Bennett.
Yes, thank you. I have questioned these before, not because I think we necessarily should be charging them, but I wonder how does the cost that the city incurs in supervising this project, issuing a permit, doing the inspections that are necessitated, how is that cost then paid for? This is an enterprise facility, not part of the general fund, and so how is this accounted for in the city's budget, the CIP, and the audit?
Councilmember Bennett, members of the council, that is correct. So what we're asking the council to do tonight is to waive approximately a $7,900 building permit that would be a general revenue of the city that would have, but for this action, been paid for from a rec facility budget. In this case, the rec facility budget is, I think, in just general description, not as strong as the city's general fund. That's not always the case. But to leave that $7,900 in the golf fund felt to us more prudent than charging it and putting it into the general fund. Your question about how does the supervision take place, or how does the payment of the supervision take place?
Well, it's my understanding that there is a cost to the city supervising this work, just as there would be in any other
Yes.
construction
Yep.
project.
Yes.
And if it's not borne by the enterprise for which the services are being provided, then it's being borne by the general taxpayer.
Yes, that's true. That's true.
And is that made clear in the
So it's a
audit
fee.
that there's I mean, I know that there are greater shifts of dollars, hundreds of thousands of dollars that have gone to the Gulf Fund, which is part of why we've taken some of the actions that we've taken in the last couple of years. But is this smaller subsidy then reflected somewhere in the accounting or audit?
It is not reflected in our budget, but what's more important to the auditors is that we have a paper trail showing why we deferred the revenue from the general fund. And so that's really the purpose of this action, is to create a paper trail that shows that we did bring this action to the council and the council did authorize it.
Okay, thank you.
Member Swenson.
I'll move this issue.
Second.
Got a motion and a second with respect to the request to waive the building permit fees for the work that the city's doing on its own Braemar Clubhouse renovation project. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Carried. And now we are on to the special recognitions and presentations portion of the agenda. And this is a nice event this evening. We've got one of our companies that has been award-winning, I think is fair to say. Last year they got a wonderful award from one of the associations, business associations in our community, Precision Gasket Company, which is right over off 169 in Edina, has been working with some students on a partnership. And gentlemen, Mr. Harvey, Mr. Bauer, you want to come up and bring your students with you and ask them to come up and talk a little bit about what you've had them doing in terms of the student partnership? And then introduce yourselves too, please.
My name is Sophia Roman. I'm a senior at Edina High School. This is my 4th year in the Project Lead the Way curriculum, and the career path I have chosen to pursue is mechanical engineering. PLTW stands for Project Lead the Way and is the nation's leading provider in the STEM curriculum, which stands for Science, Technology, Engineering, and Math. And PLTW, Project Lead the Way, emphasizes hands-on learning in its coursework, allowing students to take classes starting in 9th grade and through 12th grade of the different types of engineering that you can pursue. And for the past 8 weeks, we have partnered with Precision Gasket Company on a couple different projects. One about a filter that we can reverse engineer for Edina Public School District. And this opportunity gained us the experience in a real-world engineering firm and in a business setting. And we also worked alongside engineers in the fields that we were looking at to see if this is what we wanted to do in our future.
All right. Now, the microphone wasn't on when you gave us your name, but I think folks would love to know.
My name is Sophia Roman.
Thank you, Sophia.
My name is Harrison Delecki. I'm also a senior at Edina High School. And for this project, PGC was asked by the Edina Public School System to reverse engineer a existing air filter that is used in the overhead projectors in our classrooms. And so we went through the entire design process of picking out materials and doing measurements on the existing product and designing a new way to manufacture this product. And this was our end result, a brand new air filter for the overhead projectors in our classrooms. And overall, we reduced the price of these by about 45%.
All right, very good, Harrison. And then,
my name is Logan Ramlet. I'm also a senior at Edina High School. My project was a little bit different than theirs. I had the problem of turning an air compressor on that would walk around on the floor, and we had to start, the applications engineer I worked with at Precision Gasket Company, we had to start by figuring out the problem and how to address it. So we started at the very start with the problem, going to prototyping opposed to having a model and reverse engineering it. Prior to this, I had to do a lot of background research with the engineer who I worked with directly, which was the best resource I've ever had for this kind of opportunity, and including a lot of reading on my own that he provided me to learn about these specific kinds of materials, these processes to isolate this system efficiently. And I would definitely say I would never have had this opportunity to learn about this without this program. It offered me a lot of knowledge that I would never have attained in school, even in the engineering classes, because it's so broad, all of engineering, that this really offered me a broader view on the area, especially what Precision Gasket Company does. I would say that it definitely helped me personally narrow down that engineering is what I'd like to do. Maybe not that specific type, but it helped show me the process of working in a company as an engineer and how many hands these ideas go through before solutions are brought to the table. And I thought that was something very valuable, which obviously I can never attain from school. I'd like to thank Precision Gasket Company, John and Dan, and City Council, thank you, and Mayor Hovland. Appreciate it to share our experience.
Logan. Yeah, thank you for coming this evening and sharing those stories with us. John and Dan, you want to comment at all about the program and how you guys decided to get involved in this program?
John, please do.
Yep. Well, thanks for allowing us to be here tonight. My name is John Bauer. I'm the Director of Sales and Marketing for Precision Gasket. It was probably 2 years ago at an Edina Chamber event when Randy Smallsall with Rick Dressen, the school superintendent, presented the Next Generation Pilot Program. And immediately on hearing about how they are transforming learning in K through 12, I made a career change to a manufacturing company, to Precision Gasket. Dan Harvey is our president, and he is also an engineer. We saw an opportunity where we could engage with the Edina Public Schools to truly help these students. What's ironic is they actually helped us more than we probably helped them. And it was really a gift. And so I've had the opportunity to get to know a lot of connections in the community over my 16 and a half years with Scott Neal, the chamber, and the school district, and we thought this would be a perfect fit for an Edina-based company that's been around since 1964. We're striving to find the right people and share good ideas and best practices, and to have the Edina's finest students come and see us and spend some time with our engineers was truly a delight. And so it's our honor.
Yeah, thanks, John. Thanks. Sophia and Harrison and Logan, come on back up. I think we're going to have a photo here up in the front.
Get nice and cozy now.
I'll let folks exit here that want to. So we're going to recognize two of our colleagues who are leaving the council. This is their last meeting. And they have both done wonderful work for our community with distinctly different styles, I would say. Joni Bennett, to my left, has been on the council for 8 years, has been involved actively in the community for many, many years, preceding her involvement on the council. She is extraordinarily bright, works very, very hard, maintains flawless notes on everything that we do here as a council, reminds us when something was decided in a potentially different way or a slightly different manner than what some of us might have recalled because of those notes that she's been so prolific at taking. She cares deeply about the community. She will continue to care deeply about the community, but she and her husband have some things they want to do. And after that interim stint, I think we'll see her actively involved in the community again in a different way. So for those 8 fabulous years of service, I think it would be appropriate for everybody in this room to recognize her service to our town. Thank you. And we've got some plaques we'll pass out in a moment, I think. For Josh Sprague, he moved. I heard him say tonight he moved to town in 2006, and he's just been a whirlwind. He's again, we're gifted in Edina with all of our residents so well educated, so articulate in the positions that they take, so thoughtful. Whether they're appearing in front of us on an issue that's controversial, or they're sitting up here in the dais with all of the council members. Josh fits that mold. He's been immersed in all things Edina since he got here in 2006, ran for the council once, barely lost to member Brindle, as I recall. And then made it on 4 years ago and has just been a terrific member of the city council. Very thoughtful, a great deal of foresight on the things that he thinks about. I have just found him to be a superlative member of the city council, along with member Bennett. So we want to thank him for his 4 years of service as well, and wish him all the best in the time to come. Thanks, Josh. And Joni will give you the microphone as a prerogative here with seniority, if you want to make a couple of comments.
Just some brief comments. I want to thank the citizens of Edina for giving me the opportunity to serve them for the past 8 years. I want to thank staff for their gracious professional assistance every day of the last 8 years. I think we are a well-managed city with very dedicated employees. And finally, I want to wish my colleagues the best of luck as you continue to work on these things that we've been working on and keeping the community strong. Thank you very much.
Josh, your comments, please.
Thank you very much. My deepest gratitude to all the residents for the honor of serving. I had a certain wish list. I remember meeting with Manager Neal very early on. I had a wish list, things I wanted to get accomplished, and that list has been doubled or tripled since we started. So we really had an amazing dream team this last 4 years between staff and council and our commissioners and residents. Just a lot of different people came together to get some needed planning for the future done. And the things that have been set in place will outlast all of our service on the council. I'm just so grateful to have been a part of that process and the legacy of what this council has done. This special group of people who are come from very different backgrounds and approach things in very different ways, but we're able to come together will, like I said, outlast us all for a long time. So thank you again.
Thank you. About a month ago, the three of us were having a after-dark conversation out in the parking lot, and I asked him if I could give him each a hug, and that went okay. That was okay. People were comfortable with that. But I'll tell you, even tonight, it's very difficult to see them leave, to see them go. It's quite emotional. So, thank you for your service. Both of you. All right. We're on to the public hearing portion of the agenda. And the first matter we have in front of us this evening, Director Milner has. And that is the potential vacation of a public right-of-way at 5320 Kelsey Terrace.
Mayor, members of council, thank you. The request comes from the property owner at 5320 Kelsey Terrace. It's embodied in Resolution 2014-160. The location, it's in the Parkwood Knolls neighborhood. It's 5320 Kelsey Terrace and the adjacent outlot, and it's for a house addition in that area. The original lot was dedicated in Parkwood Knolls, the 14th edition in 1966, and the outlot was part of the 26th edition of the Parkwood Knolls in 2004. It's a diagram of the area that the applicant is wishing to vacate. There's a 5-foot utility easement located in that blue square adjacent to their property. You can see the existing home to the left of that blue box, and they want to expand and do an addition to that home. Outlot B, just to the northeast, is shown there just to the north of that blue hatched area. We do have, the city does own a storm pipe within that outlot, but it is on the northerly property line, well away from this requested vacation. We contacted the private utilities, CenterPoint, CenturyLink, Xcel, and Comcast, and there was either no response or no objection to this request. So staff is recommending the council approve the vacation of this requested 5 feet, and that they approve Resolution 2014-160. I'll stand for any questions.
Questions for Director Milner?
Yep.
Member Brindle.
So where do you put the storm pipe that gets moved from there?
The storm pipe will not be moved. If you notice where that the northerly pipe is on the north side of the outlot, it's over here.
Yeah.
The vacation is way down here on this property line. So there's no public utilities that are going to be touched with this. They'll stay where they are today. So we're just vacating this portion of it. The storm pipe is up here. You can see that.
Well, the storm pipe is up there.
Way up there. Yep.
All right. We just have an easement.
We have an easement down on that.
Okay, great. I misunderstood. I thought something was being moved. Thank you.
Other questions for Director Milner? All right. This is a public hearing. I'm going to open this matter up for public testimony. And if you recall, Ms. Benarat indicated, and this is true for anybody here, for any public hearing matter this evening, you'll have 3 minutes. And when you have 30 seconds left, you'll get a yellow light, and that will be the signal for you to wrap up your comments. Don't forget to give us your name and address when you come up. If you want to use the overhead, we'll give you a handheld microphone, and you can be at the center podium. Otherwise, we would suggest that you use the side podiums. They're a little bit more effective for communication purposes. So, is there anyone that wishes to come forward and testify regarding this matter? All right, seeing no one come forward, is there a motion to close the public hearing?
So moved.
Second.
Got a motion and a second to close the public hearing. Discussion, all those in favor of closing the public hearing, say aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed say nay. Carried. Do we have a motion regarding this matter?
Second.
We got a motion and a second to approve the vacation of the public right-of-way easement for 5320 Kelsey Terrace embodied in Resolution 2014-160. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed say nay. Carried. Next matter is another proposed vacation.
Mayor, members of council, this vacation comes at a request of the Edina Public Schools near the Countryside Elementary School. It's embodied in Resolution 2014-161. The property is located at the Countryside Elementary School, and its address is 5701 Benton Avenue. The easement was part of the original 1955 Broadmoor Addition plat, And you can see here at the time it was slated for 5 residential lots, hence there was an easement on the back property line for future use. With the addition of the school, that use is no longer needed. Here is the hatched area of that drainage and utility easement. Runs along just to the north of the current building of the Countryside Elementary. There are no city utilities within that easement, and we ran this by the utilities, and there was no objections or no responses by those 4 private utility companies. So staff is again recommending vacating the requested 5-foot drainage and utility easement, and that council approve resolution 2014-161. And I'll stand for any questions on this one.
Questions for Director Milner?
No.
All right. No questions at the moment, Director. I'll open this matter up for a public hearing. Is there anyone in the audience who wishes to come forward and testify regarding this matter? Seeing no one coming forward, is there a motion to close the public hearing?
So moved. Second.
Got a motion and a second to close the public hearing. Discussion? All those in favor of closing the public hearing, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, say nay. Carried. Do we have a motion regarding this matter?
So moved.
Second.
Got a motion and second to adopt Resolution 2014-161, which provides for the vacation of a public right-of-way easement, Countryside Elementary School. And all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, say nay. Carried. Next matter before us is just a continuation to February 3rd for the proposed ordinance regarding the regulation and protection of trees on low-density residential property. And now we here to the public hearing on the proposed transfer of the cable TV franchise from Comcast to Midwest Cable. We should probably have the presentation for Mr. Grogan before we open
Need to
it up
move
for
to
public
continue the
testimony.
hearing. Mayor?
Oh, yeah.
I'll
Let me
move that.
Move the public hearing matter?
Yes.
All right. On
I'll
five,
second the February 3rd
thank you. Six,
continuation.
thank you. On matter 6C, we got a motion and a second to continue the public hearing to February 3rd, 2015 with respect to the proposed tree ordinance. Any further discussion on that?
Just one question for Planner
Sure.
T. What are the elements that they're still working on?
They held a public hearing at their last meeting last week, and we're working on some exemptions in regard to subdivisions. We didn't think about streets, utilities, and we got into changing some, we got into wordsmithing, and it got to be so much that we decided we better just table it for another meeting and go through it one more time. So the Planning Commission will continue their discussion at their first meeting in January, so that would continue the public hearing here until the first meeting in February.
Thank you.
Should we table this matter until Mr. Rogan arrives? How would be that? What would you want to do procedurally?
I think we just discussed that. I think that is what we'd like.
Okay.
Have we voted on continuing the public hearing to September?
No.
I thought we did. Oh, all right. All those in favor of continuing the public hearing on the tree ordinance to February 3rd, 2015, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, say nay. Carried. All right. Is there a motion to table the public hearing with respect to the proposed transfer of the cable TV franchise from Comcast to Midwest Cable?
So moved.
Second?
We're tabling it. Let's
Tabling
be
it till
later when.
Later in the evening.
we're tabling it until Mr. Grogan gets here. And we will handle this matter yet this evening.
Okay, later this evening.
Yeah. All right. Any further discussion? All those in favor of tabling this matter until later in the agenda, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, say nay. Carried. Community comment. Is there anyone in the audience that wishes to raise an issue or inquire of the council with regard to a matter that's not on the agenda this evening? All right, seeing no one coming forward, we will move on to the next portion of the agenda, which is the reports and recommendations portion of the agenda. We've got some things we need to work on there, and the first matter is the proposed budget levy for 2015 and the potential adoption of a 2015 operating budget, and Manager Neal has this matter.
Thank you, Your Honor. We have been working together, and I mean as staff and council team, on this budget proposal on pretty regular intervals throughout the year. And every time I think we've come together with you, we've sort of given you the litany of what we did and what date we did it. So we've been doing that every time, and we did it the last at our public hearing that we held just at our last meeting on December 2nd, earlier this month. At our public hearing, we had one testifier, and that testifier testified on a valuation issue and not on a taxing or spending issue. At this point, we have produced a budget that we believe is consistent with the City Council's work plans. That's consistent with your other goals for the city. We've shown you this on a regular basis. We would really we would like your support for it tonight, and we ask for your support of the proposed operating levy, and stand to answer any questions that you have tonight. We have not prepared any additional versions of the budget or options of the budget. We haven't received any requests for that. So we are here tonight asking you to approve the proposed budget that we detailed in the public hearing on December 2nd.
Member Swenson.
I'll make a motion to support Resolution 2014-162, setting the 2015 tax levy and adopting the 2015 operating budget.
Second.
All right, got a motion and a second. Discussion, questions for Manager Neal?
I just have
Member Brindle.
Thank you. I just have a couple of comments on this. I came on as a council member for the first time in 2009, and like all of you, the recession was affecting the city budget, and so projects and items in the plan, in the CIP, the capital improvement plan, and projects that were on the slate to be accomplished by the city from the various departments were being moved around and delayed. Trucks were used longer before they were replaced. And so some of what we're seeing in this budget is as a result of some of those projects just having to be done. And so it's a pain. Setting a levy is a painful process because it costs us all money, and that is not an easy decision to make up here. The last time, now we did an important and very large project this year with Braemar Field, the backyard, and the improvements to Pamela Park. So those are reflected in this levy increase for this year. The last time we had a project of that size was the new Public Works building, and we had levy increases over 3 years to pay for that. The difference with this one is we're doing it in 1 year, so next year we go back to the modest levy of 2%. That's where we've been in the recent years, is 1%, 2%, 2.5%, something like that. And so we have it on good authority from our finance director that's after paying for our big project this year and some of the other things that go along with it to catch us up on some things, that we will return to our much smaller levy next year. And by smaller, I will tell you the number. You're going to see the number. It's 8.18. And we share in this. It is a city that is accomplishing amazing things. We are able to borrow money at less than 1% interest. So doing these things now, when we have that kind of an interest rate, is also very attractive. So I just wanted to put that out there so that you have an understanding of what goes into this decision.
Thank you, Member Brindle. Manager Neal, your comment?
Yeah, I just wanted to, thank you, Your Honor. I just wanted to affirm some of what Councilmember Brindle just went over. You know, prior to 2015, if you look at the average annual increase in our tax levy for the 4 years prior, it's less than 2%. In 2015, it's 8%, and that begs the question of what's happening. And I think, as Councilmember Brindle just discussed, The biggest part of that, more than half of that proposed levy increase, is due to a very large capital project in our parks, park improvement project, both in Pamela Park, Braemar Field, and the Backyard project, and absorbing a large debt service obligation in year one. We're taking it on because we can afford to do it in this particular year. The other thing that I will tell you that is we are fortunate for in this particular budget climate starting next year is that we have a 14% increase in our tax capacity, which is almost unprecedented in our city's history. And probably in cities all over the Twin Cities. I'd be surprised if anyone had something of that nature. It's really a testimony to what we see generally in terms of Edina's desirability as a community, and also just the general development that's happening around town. So the benefits of that begin to kick in, but the biggest thing, of course, is the decertification of the Centennial Lakes TIF district, and that only happens once, and it's after 26 years and being in a TIF district, it happens next year. So that's a big event. Our general increase in what it costs us to operate the city is about 2% from this year to the next. So I think from a management standpoint, I think that's good. The other piece of this budget, though, is the capital, is funding the CIP, and we're going to look at some of those projects in a few moments. But that's also a commitment by the council on a going forward basis to provide money each year to make improvements to our parks and streets and sidewalks and other parts of our city facilities and capital improvements around town. So it's a good year to do it. It has because the tax base is growing faster than the levy increase. We're able to provide really more bang for the buck in terms of how our budget works for the upcoming year.
Thank you. Member Bennett.
Thank you. Manager Neal, is it my understanding that once a levy is adopted, that levy itself won't disappear in future years? This is the first year, so that goes into a levy increase, and there may be smaller levy increases in the future, but the levy that's adopted tonight, because it's a multi-year levy, will remain going forward? In other words,
Councilmember Bennett, if you're
going to be paid for over years.
Right, if you're referring to a levy that's associated with a debt service payment, you're correct.
Yes.
But levies that are associated with non-debt service payments is not correct. Those levies can go up and down,
Sure.
But once a levy is associated or levied for the purpose of retiring debt, it's locked in until that debt is retired.
Sure, and I won't be voting for the budget tonight. It's the first time in 8 years I voted against it. I would have voted for it in two parts because I've been on the council with the graphs going like this, starting in 2007 when we didn't know we were heading for a recession, and then the recessionary years when every single department tightened its belt, positions went unfilled, equipment went unreplaced, and there was, I think, excellent stewardship on the part of city government during those leaner years. We are in a better economic time, and it is time to catch up with some of those things. And I can definitely support the part of the levy increase that's related to the general budget and the general fund. Where I differ and have differed from my colleagues now for over a year is something that causes more than 4% increase in the levy. I think should have gone to the voters directly. It's a combination of sports facilities that we knew from our quality of life surveys had the community about divided equally. There were people who strongly supported it, people who didn't support it at all, people who slightly supported it, people who slightly opposed it, and we didn't ask them a question in that survey, how do you feel if it adds to your taxes? So that part was incomplete. And I know that the facilities have been completed. I've heard some good things about them, but I still think that that question should have gone to the voters. And that's over half of the levy increase. That's over 4% of the 8%. I know as a council we haven't received much correspondence on this. I have had some phone calls from people who, through the unhappy accident of the valuation of their home now climbing, because that was something else that took a hit during the recession, and it was unequal all over the city. Some people's home values didn't decline much. Some people's went down significantly. Now some people's values are climbing gradually, and some are skyrocketing, depending on neighborhood and their own personal, the home itself. But when that increase in value is combined with an 8% levy increase, I think there are some people who've at least expressed to me that it's going to be a hit for them. So those are my reasons for casting the vote that I'll be taking this evening. And again, I do think that there's been good stewardship. It's a difference on how some major things get done and the voice of the voters.
Thank you. Member Swenson, then Member Sprague.
No, I made the motion, I support it.
I just wanted to comment, the sports dome improvements took over a decade to do, so it wasn't an overnight matter. Had it been done earlier, as the need was rising, the cost probably would have been 30 or 40% less. So luckily for the bond issue that was so low, we got a really great debt service number. And obviously both the dome and the 4-sheet ice and the Pamela Park field improvements are strategic assets that are going to be used for the betterment of our youth. It's a youth development objective that's being fulfilled, so I support that. And obviously the 4% increase that is related to that. But I've worked hard in the last 4 years, along with my colleagues, to practice good stewardship with the budget, to live within our means but keep service value high. And I think that's reflected in the 1 to 2% increases over the last 4 years, and every one has been hard fought through by each one of us up to the very last vote. So I appreciate management working with us to achieve this kind of our strategic vision of having very low and stable tax rates for our residents. But the other half of this is something that has been structurally underfunded, the equipment replacement fund. That funding was taken away in 2010, and I don't see Edina structurally underfunding something in the long run. That's just not responsible financial planning and leadership. And so I think those cuts need to be restored so that we have the right equipment in place to service the city. So that's why I'll be supporting this. And as I understand, Manager Neal, your comments is that the 8% levy increase for many will be blunted by the tax capacity growing faster than the actual levy for next year.
In fact, it's approximately a third of our taxpayers will have no increase to a decrease in their city tax.
I'm not one of them, but anyway. So those are the reasons I'll be supporting this tonight. Thank you.
I thought that was quite, it just shows you the complexity of working on the budget when you got a situation where you have an anomalous year where you're adding in a project that a lot of people in your community wanted for many, many years, and you have a tax base in that particular year growing very fast, and then a TIF district expiring, so that the tax base growing faster than the levy base or levy increase results in a situation where 30 residents are going to be flat or go down on their taxes. So that's a really positive thing. I think the other thing to just reiterate is that to run the town, the budget is up 1.89%, and you can attribute that to inflation and commodities prices, all labor cost increases. That's very responsible thing. The other things that make up that 8.4%, we've mentioned the three things that drove it this year with those higher costs: the new sports dome, the fourth rink, the backyard they call it, as Member Brindle said, the improvements at Pamela Park. But then other things that we needed to do for our town are encompassed on that portion of the agenda too that resulted in that increase, and that's fire station debt for the fire station on Tracy. We're actually in year 11 of paying off the gyms that we built. At City Hall here, we're in year 14, so we're getting near the end of the payment periods on some of these bonding matters that where the bonds were issued for 20 years. So, and then we've got the public works debt as well to deal with. So, I think Member Sprague said it well. We've been responsible. This is a bit of an anomalous year, but we'll be paying for things that all of us want, all of us need in our community, and it makes Edina an ever better place to live. So I'm going to support this as well. We had a motion. We had a second. Any further discussion, Member Brindle? All those in favor say aye. 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 Opposed say nay.
Nay.
Carried.
Your Honor?
No, I saw Mr. Grogan walk in.
Mr. Grogan is here.
All right, let's go back and is there a motion to reopen the public hearing matter with respect to the proposed transfer of the cable TV franchise from Conquest to Midwest Cable? Mr. Grogan, welcome.
Mr. Grogan is going to do his presentation from the dais tonight. And I'll let him decide if he wants to explain why.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. Start over. Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. For the record, my name is Brian Grogan. I'm an attorney with the Minneapolis law firm of Moss & Barnett. Here tonight representing the Southwest Cable Commission and therefore indirectly the city of Edina that's a member of that commission. As Mr. Neal mentioned, I appreciate you allowing me to sit for this presentation. I had a little procedure done on my foot, and about 5 minutes into that I might have to sit on the ground and give the rest of the presentation. So I appreciate your accommodation. We're here tonight talking about the transfer of the cable television franchise. Just to refresh everyone's memory, about 2 years ago the city adopted a new cable franchise with Comcast. That franchise extends for 10 years. And tonight we're talking about Comcast no longer providing service within the city of Edina, or frankly within the Twin Cities metro area. And do we have the slideshow, Mr. Neal, available?
We do, don't we? Yes.
Okay, I'll kind of continue forward. I want to. We have a few visuals that'll help the council and members of the audience kind of appreciate what's going on. But this all culminates from a rather large transaction, nearly $50 billion transaction, where Comcast is going to be acquiring Time Warner Cable nationwide. And as a result, they're going to have nearly 34 million cable customers throughout the country. Because of that number of customers, one of the things that the company has chosen to do is to voluntarily divest itself of 4 million of those customers in an effort to achieve what is kind of an unwritten benchmark at the federal level. That is, you don't exceed 30 million customers nationwide for fear that it will trigger significant antitrust concerns. So the deal itself is still pending FCC approval that's expected in the first quarter of 2015. But because of that divestiture of 4 million subscribers, it's created quite a confusing transaction that's going to directly impact your constituents here in Edina. There's going to be a new cable operator serving this city if this transaction is approved, probably at the end of the first quarter. That company started out being known as SpinCo, which was just a placeholder for a spin-off company. It then was named Midwest Cable, which is the name that it holds today. It's been announced that that will be renamed to Great Land Connections. So that will be the new operator effective this spring serving the Twin Cities market. Not to be confused with Target Great Land, but Great Land Connections. When we have that presentation, I'll show you briefly a map of where the coverage will be for that company. The thing that's unique about this transaction is because this is going to be a brand new company, it's going to be heavily dependent on another cable operator that operates here in the state of Minnesota known as Charter Communications. Charter Communications operates right now up from Duluth, St. Cloud, Rochester, Mankato, Winona. It has a fairly significant presence here in Minnesota. All my wonderful visuals are going by the wayside here, but that's okay.
You're doing well.
At any rate, Charter has a large presence in the state. They're actually a Fortune 500 company. They're going to be relied upon to provide a significant amount of operational support. And that's really what Midwest Cable is going to rely upon. So let me talk for a moment about, it looks like we have the slides. That's wonderful.
Where do you want me to start, Brian?
Oh, perfect. Thank you so much. So just to recap, we'll fly through these pretty quickly. This describes the fact that there was this merger announced last February. 34 million customers, they voluntarily agreed to divest. This is the map that I wanted to give you, the big global picture of this transaction. You see that blue dot that represents the Twin Cities market. That's what Comcast currently operates in the state of Minnesota. It's a little more than 500,000 customers in the Twin Cities market. This transaction will give them systems starting in the blue, which are current Comcast systems up in Washington State. They'll acquire all of Los Angeles, which is currently the, let's say, orangish color there, that's Time Warner. And they'll go all the way through Texas, and then they'll own virtually all of the East Coast. That's the 34 million customers. Now, I've superimposed on this slide the other major cable operators in the country. And focusing on Minnesota here, you see the Comcast blue. The green that's represented there are the charter systems that I described, from Duluth, St. Cloud, all the way down to, again, Winona in the far corner of the state. The yellow is a company called Mediacom. Too many different M's here. Mediacom, and they're not involved in this transaction. But again, focusing on that green, that's going to become prominent as I move forward in this presentation. So the divestiture that I described resulted in them selling, Comcast selling about 1.5 million customers over to Charter. In the ideal world, Charter would have acquired all 4 million of those customers that I described, but there simply wasn't sufficient financial resources to do it. So they did some system swaps, and ultimately they had to create a whole new subsidiary known as Midwest Cable. This is what I've already verbally described to you, just a summary and overview of Charter. So we'll pick it up here with the Midwest Cable slide. This new company, and it is just that, it will be a brand new publicly traded company, will have 2.5 million cable subscribers, 500,000 of which will be here in the Twin Cities market. Another major section will be over in Detroit, and then they'll have systems throughout Illinois, Indiana, all the way down to Alabama. One of the reasons they're renaming it Great Land Connections is Midwest Cable did not sell very well down in Alabama. They don't view themselves to be Midwestern necessarily. The Twin Cities portion of this spinoff then is going to be a very significant piece of that entity. But it is going to be a brand new entity. So one thing that I would expect mayor and council to ask me is, did you contact other cities that they operate in? Did you ask other city councils how they complied with their contract? And the answer is no, I didn't, because they don't own any contracts today. They don't serve any other customers. They don't, frankly, exist as we sit here today. They are part of this transaction that will be created assuming the approval comes at the federal level. They have, however, created a new executive team that is managing or will be managing that company, and I'll describe them in a moment. But as you can see, it becomes very challenging for me to give you an overview of qualifications of this company. This gives a depiction of what this company will be. The orange dot where the Twin Cities are will be the Midwest Cable piece of this. Those blue dots, again, represent the Charter Communications properties as they exist today. So who will run Midwest Cable? Who will run the cable system that will serve the city of Edina? A third of it will be owned by Charter Communications. 2/3 of it will be owned by Comcast shareholders, as opposed to Comcast corporate. Comcast, again, is divesting of this system, so they cannot have any direct ownership of the system. They're going to have a 9-member board. They've appointed a gentleman named Michael Wilner as their CEO, Chief Operating Officer. He has 4 decades of experience in the cable industry. He created and ran very successfully a company called Insight Communications down in Illinois and Indiana. And they've brought him back after having sold that company to run this. He's brought most of his executive team from the Insight Communications over to help run this. And remember that Comcast is motivated to see a successful management team because they are putting this in the hands of 2/3 of their shareholders. But they have no operating history. This is the schematic that describes the ownership structure for Midwest Cable. If you see in the bottom center the OpCo, that would be the operating company that will hold the Edina franchise. It will be owned by Midwest Cable, and there you see that 2/3, 1/3 ownership structure. Timeline for the city action. We should have been ruling on this in the October timeframe. Typically, we have 120 days from the day we're given this transfer application to take action. The application came in on June 18th. But because of the complexity of this transaction and the multiple filings at the Securities and Exchange Commission to clarify how the debt will be handled and the other aspects of the financial portion of the equation, there's been multiple extensions of that deadline. First was to December 15th. Our new present deadline is January 15th, and there are still extensions going beyond that. Commission has already taken action on this matter. We did that about a week or 2 ago. That's the 5-member cities of Minnetonka, Edina, Eden Prairie, Richfield, and Hopkins. They did unanimously vote to approve the resolution that's in your agenda packet this evening. But the criteria is the same for both the city and for the commission. It's that we're to look at the legal, technical, and financial qualifications of this company. And as I mentioned, that is a challenging process here. What I can tell you from all the due diligence that we've done is that all of the local field personnel, that is the individuals driving the trucks through the city of Edina that are currently Comcast employees, will be acquired and made offers by the new company, essentially will be the Midwest Cable employees. All the government affairs personnel that interact with your city staff and the elected officials, those are also going to be extended positions through Midwest Cable. But virtually everybody else that works at Comcast that runs the systems today will not be part of this transaction. Almost all of the operational services, and I'll describe those in a moment, are going to be provided by Charter Communications through a separate services agreement. That's what makes this transaction so unique in the industry. I've been doing this now for 25 years, and this is a case of first impression in terms of this. What Charter's going to provide to Midwest are the following, and Midwest is going to be paying 4.25% of every dollar they make on cable, telephone, and broadband services, in addition to actual costs for all of these things. Let's start with programming. Comcast's Xfinity suite is not going to be the suite of programming that you'll be subscribing to. It'll be known as Spectrum, which is the the Charter marketing name for their suite of programming. There's likely to be differences in the programming offerings that you get today and what you will get in this new lineup. I can't tell you what those are, but there are likely to be differences because of the programming agreements between the companies. All network operations will be handled by Charter. IT, back engineering, everything that would be involved in the computer side of running the business, all handled by Charter. All of the customer service, where phone calls are made from Edina residents to try to get customer service assistance. Currently, those go to Comcast customer service centers. They call them centers of excellence in their vernacular. They will be switching over to Charter's customer service offices. Midwest Cable is considering whether to acquire a call center themselves, but right now they are part of the services that Charter will be offering. Billing and collections will be Charter. Marketing and sales will be Charter. All back office will be Charter. So as you can see, there's a significant nexus between these two companies and who will be actually providing the services to your residents. Impact on your subscribers, we're drilling down now to the nitty-gritty of what this will mean. If you have a Comcast telephone number, so if you're a triple play customer and you have a telephone number right now, you'll be able to keep that telephone number. You won't have to change. In Minnesota, we have something called number portability from the Public Utilities Commission, so that's not something that's going to change. That's good news. You'll likely be able to keep all of the equipment that you have in your home, your Xfinity equipment, your cable boxes, that is compatible with Charter, and at least for the foreseeable future, they don't anticipate the need to have to swap all of that out, which would be a huge task for 550,000 customers throughout the Twin Cities. Not so good news on the email. Comcast.net, the domain name that many folks have for their email, that will eventually be transitioned away. They haven't specified the exact domain that you'll be migrated to, but it's likely to be charter.com, which is the domain that Charter uses. There's no certainty on that, but that's the expectation. When that transition occurs, which will probably happen throughout the second half of 2015, the companies certainly maintain that they will provide sufficient transition period and forwarding of emails as that transition occurs. But without question, that is going to be an inconvenience for residents and businesses that have relied upon the Comcast.com, .net domain. Billing will transition to Midwest, what will then be known as Great Land Connections. Won't be a problem in terms of folks who receive their bill at home. They'll just make their check out to somebody new. It may be a problem for those of you who have it automatically debited from the account, from your bank account, like I do. I live over in St. Paul. We'll have to contact our banks and change that billing authorization. As you can see, though, as we go through the litany of issues here, there are going to be many more needs for customers to actually touch a customer service representative. If you're not a person who calls regularly, you can see there's ripe opportunity here as a need for customer service. Recall that I mentioned at the very beginning, Charter currently oversees 6 million cable customers nationwide in 29 different states. With this transaction, they'll acquire another $1.5 million, and then they'll be managing for Midwest another $2.5 million. So they'll go from a 6 million customer company to a 10 million customer company, which is a significant increase, and there's a lot of transition to be accomplished. I'm not going to spend too much time on the financial review. There are roughly 9 or 10 pages on the financial review in the report that's in your packet. It describes in great detail the financial qualifications. I can say that the company's own SEC filings label themselves as a highly leveraged company. Comparing them to Comcast is probably not favorable for Midwest, because Comcast is one of the most financially stable communications companies in the country. They have very low debt-to-equity ratio by comparison of their peers. However, Midwest and Greatland will have margins that are very similar to many other cable operators, and I listed that in a summary form here. It's described in far greater detail in the report in your packet. Moving to the topic that is before you this evening, which is consideration of a resolution. The resolution would approve this transaction based on certain criteria. First, the obvious one that the new grantee, which is going to be Comcast of Minnesota, but owned by Greatland Connections, will obviously accept all the terms of that new franchise from 2 years ago. We've also required a corporate guarantee that's incorporated by reference into the resolution from Greatland Connections. What that means is the entire 2.5 million subscriber company would have to fail before they would no longer honor any financial obligations to the city. So it's trying to tie as tightly as we can the financial security for payment of franchise fees, PEG fees, other obligations for the use of your right-of-way as high up the food chain as we can. In our franchise, there were certain provisions that were clear between the city and the existing company, Comcast, but presented possibly some ambiguity when a new company came into town. And the resolution has a number of issues where we've tried to spell out, to be crystal clear, exactly what the obligations of the company will be. For example, the simulcast of this meeting in both SD and HD, we wanted to clarify that that would continue going forward, making sure that certain fiber connections between Edina and its fellow commission cities and the head end would be maintained at no cost to the city or the commission. Speaking to customer service, which directly impacts your constituents, we've required the continuation of what's known as an escalated complaint process, so that if customers contact the city staff, particularly Mr. Neal's staff, that the staff will be able to direct those calls directly to an elevated customer service representative instead of funneling them back into a 1-800 number, where we have found that we get far greater service for the customers that have particular issues with the company. We insisted on that being continued. That was a topic that Mr. Neal and other managers in the commission emphasized, and we've tried to carry that forward. That is now a condition of this resolution. Also require that they come in and visit with city staff, elected officials, commission, to clarify how this transition is going forward and to address deficiencies as the transition plays out. They'll have to do that for 2 years on a quarterly basis. Finally, that they reimburse all of the city's costs and the commission's costs related to the transfer review. This was over a half-a-year project to get to this point. We received this application in June, and we're not going to finish the approvals until after the holidays. So significant costs incurred, but the city will be made whole on that and fully reimbursed. So in conclusion, the Southwest Commission did unanimously approve this resolution. If the commission, or if this city council moves forward with it, then we will forward it on to the company, and we will then make sure that we receive an executed guarantee coming back from them, as well as commitments to all of the other obligations. And with that, Mayor, I'll pause for questions.
Excellent presentation on a complex issue. Member Swenson, I'd be interested in your observations as a member of the Cable Commission on the dialogue that took place prior to the group determining to pass this resolution or make the recommendations to the various city councils.
Sure. You know, our group comprises of Richfield, Eden Prairie, Bloomington, Hopkins, and us. We do all the playback right now for the cable channels as part of an agreement, and there is a studio out in Bloomington that we rent for people if they want to produce cable programs. That's part of the commitment as money we get from the cable company to have access to the public for television cable. I think the most interesting thing about this is as you listen to what your choices are, we have to have a rock-solid contract that protects us the most. To try to say that we're not going to approve this really isn't a great option because it puts us in a litigation situation that really as a city we're way too small to handle, or even as a group of cities. So I think the general consensus in our group was that moving forward that Mr. Grogan had put together a good proposal and that we felt it was important to support it. Manager Neal, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I think that when people first hear about this proposal, they want to know whether there's something we can do to fight Comcast or to prevent them from leaving. And I think we had that discussion with Mr. Grogan, and you know, there are some things that might happen if we choose not to approve this franchise, but if the merger is approved with Comcast and Time Warner at the national level, they're leaving. They're not going to stick around and be our cable provider if you know, for the overall deal that's taking place here. So there will be some ways that we can make life more difficult for them, but we're not going to be able to stop a merger of the size of this one that's taking place at a national level.
I guess the only other thing I would say, and this will tell you what my monthly cable bill is like, but we also have a charter cable bill because we have a home up north on Gull Lake. And our experience with charter has not been negative at all. Actually, it's been very positive. Now, obviously, taking on all the additional new households and members will strain their organization, and there'll be some speed bumps, and I think we have to recognize that. I do think the one thing we have in our agreement that's really important is that escalation part, because that is really a way for us as city government and Scott Neal and his staff to help people within our community that are really getting frustrated and having some problems. So it's a keep your fingers crossed.
Mr. Grogan, I've got a couple of questions for you. So Midwest is going to be the cable operator, and operational services will be provided by Charter. Would the cities or the Southwest Cable Commission be in a direct contractual relationship with the operational services provider Charter, or will the contract only be with the cable operator?
It will only be with the cable operator. What one can think of this as is a very elaborate subcontractor relationship where they will be subcontracting for many of these operational services to Charter. They will be responsible for Charter's actions on this. If Charter, for example, were to fail to answer the phone calls in compliance with our franchise, we will be able to hold Midwest Cable / Great Land Connections responsible for a violation or a breach of that franchise because their operational partner has failed to perform. So we have that kind of indirect control, but there won't be any contractual relationship with Charter.
So the proposal is that we pass a resolution that Comcast or the other folks would bless, but we still have an underlying agreement that we'd have to enter into with them, or is it a
the way we've structured
an adoption situation where we're going to be basically substituting parties in the existing contract?
Exactly. So we have the underlying contract that we adopted 2 years ago. That will remain unchanged. This resolution permits the change, if you will, the transfer of the grantee from Comcast to this new entity. There is an acceptance agreement built into this resolution that has to be executed by the company that binds them to these conditions. So they will be signing off. And by the way, I've already had conversations with their legal counsel both in Philadelphia and in D.C. for Comcast and with Great Land's legal counsel, and they're in agreement with these obligations. They will execute. And then the final piece is they will execute the corporate guarantee if and when the transaction closes. If this whole deal were to fall apart, if the feds decided not to approve this, then we go back to square one. We're still served by Comcast, but by adopting this resolution, the one advantage we have, of course, is we get the costs reimbursed for this process as well. So you certainly have the option tonight to either approve this or to direct staff to go back and to try to formulate a denial. But if we go that route, I think it would be prudent for us to have a separate meeting to describe exactly what that path would look like, what our end objective may be, and what we're trying to accomplish. And I've had that discussion with Mr. Neal. That's why we're before you with a recommendation for approval of the transaction.
Okay, a couple of other questions. You mentioned that email, the Comcast.net address will be transitioned away. Does the existing agreement that we have with Comcast contemplate that type of situation? And how would consumers deal with the cost of that transition if we end up with a new, everybody ends up with a new address that's a Comcast customer?
Very good question. We fought long and hard to get clarification on many of these operational issues. Our initial reply from the companies was, we don't regulate that as a local franchising authority. We only regulate cable TV, so interesting question, but we don't have to tell you. Ultimately, I think they understood that these are the exact issues that you as an elected official need to be able to answer. They gave us that information, but the bottom line is still, if there is problems with that transition or if they fail to execute it effectively, there's really nothing the city can do. We do not regulate broadband communications or their email transmissions. It's not covered in our underlying franchise, so we would largely be powerless. That's going to have to be dictated between the customer and the company that serves them.
How about with respect to the cost for customers? I don't think anybody in this room or anybody at home believes that somebody who pays $50 billion for another company's business doesn't raise the cost to the consumer. So do we have any way to control those costs, those cost increases for consumers that are built into our Southwest Cable franchise agreement?
No cities have, for all practical purposes, no cities have rate regulation authority any longer under the FCC's rules. We would have loved to put in a provision here that would lock down the rates at their current level for a year or 2 years. The way the FCC's regulations are written, it would largely be unenforceable on its face. Even if I could get them to agree to it, it wouldn't be enforceable because of the regulations. The one thing, though, Mr. Mayor, I would add is, and this is a matter of public knowledge to many, is CenturyLink is actively seeking competitive cable television franchises throughout the Twin Cities area, including the city of Edina. They've already had preliminary discussions with city management and with the Cable Commission. It's hard to predict whether that will come to fruition, but if it were, and you had a second alternative provider in here providing wireline competitive video services, that may serve as a marketplace check on rates. And I'm not telling Comcast or anyone else that everyone's aware that those discussions are going forward. It's just hard to predict the ultimate outcome of that.
Do we have any right to use their, you mentioned some of the approvals that the transaction, or some of the conditions of approval of the transaction. One of them was verification that the fiber and equipment to be provided free of charge by the new grantee. I'm assuming that's relative to the city's PEG channel, but it made me think about whether or not we have the right to use that underground cable of Comcast for our own use because they're in our right-of-way. I know we're paying them money to allow them to be there, but is there any possibility that we'd have a broader access to their technology?
We did negotiate that issue 2 years ago when we put in place the new franchise, and ultimately the deal that we struck was dedicated fiber, but for the purpose of PEG programming. Excuse me. So we do not currently have that legal right. It would be very uncommon for us to have any control over their fiber, since, for all the reasons we read about every day in the paper in terms of packing and cybersecurity and other issues, they're very protective over the security of their network. We have what is in essence an indefeasible right to use that for that limited purpose, but not for other applications.
All right, thank you. Member Brindle.
I want to go back to the customer service call center. Refresh my memory. In that, it sounded like Charter doesn't currently have a call center If you would go back to that part of the conversation for me, please.
Sure. Charter, in fact, does have call centers located throughout the United States, and so they will try to leverage the expertise they have in handling call volume to service the new customers that they'll be operationally handling for Midwest Cable. The caveat is we've learned recently that Midwest Cable, as they dig deeper into this, is questioning whether they have a need to actually own and control at least one call center of their own because of the volume of subscribers that they have, or whether it would make more sense for them to simply continue to contract with Charter to use all of their call centers and likely grow the Charter call centers. I don't think that final decision has been made, and that will be something that is really within the discretion of the company going forward.
Okay. Second question is this like a switch going off and another switch going on, or is there a period of time where Charter comes online but Comcast is still there, so you still have full service while you're getting the new service started? How is that going to work?
That's exactly just as you described. There will be an initial, there in fact is a separate agreement to transition between Midwest Cable and Comcast for a period of months. It can extend up to a year, but they anticipate that transition will occur over the first 6 months. And then the similar transition from, as Midwest Cable begins to take on more and more responsibility, their ability to transition that off to Charter Communications over that same period.
Okay, and for people who telework, for whom the internet is not an option, it's not
it's a lifeline service.
Exactly. It's their work. How do we have any? You alluded to it before that there really isn't anything to go back and check and look and see how.
Well, we don't regulate that, but they're acquiring the entire infrastructure. The physical assets are all coming over to the new company. So they will own all of the same fiber, the same systems, the same head end. All of that will be under the control of the operator. They will be a publicly traded company, answerable to their investors, answerable to their shareholders. They have every vested interest to make sure that's a seamless transition, especially as you see competitors like CenturyLink lurking for the customers. The pressure will be on for them to perform, and I suspect they will put great energy into making sure they don't lose the loyalty of their customers. But the city will not have a play in, if they fail, in trying to enforce or impose any penalties against them, because we don't regulate the broadband service. No city does, just to be clear. That's neither the state nor the local governments regulate that. It's strictly a federally regulated entity. And in that, even there, it's very lightly regulated.
All right. And just for clarification, this is not a decision by the city to say this is the only cable provider in our city. There are other cable providers here. It just happens to be this one. There are no other cable providers here?
Mm-mm.
They could, though. It's not.
Well, that's what I guess that's my point is they could.
Right.
It's not that you couldn't have another. We just don't happen to have another.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Okay.
No,
So that's where CenturyLink is trying to come in
Right.
and be a second vendor.
Right.
Okay.
That's exactly right, Councilmember. It's a very good point to make. This is a non-exclusive franchise, has been now for over 25 years in the city. A lot of people may not recall, but maybe 15 years ago, this city actually did adopt two competitive franchises to a company called Wide Open West and another company called Everest. It happened to occur in the early 2000s, and the financial market kind of fell apart, and they lost their financing and weren't able to perform. But this city has always been very aggressive in trying to attract competition so that the marketplace can decide and the consumer can decide. And nothing in this agreement will in any way handcuff the city in that effort.
Well, my last question is really for Jennifer, and whether you have any concerns about this.
Thank you, Member Brindle, members of the council. I think both Councilmember Swenson and City Manager Scott Neal have done an excellent job representing the city on the commission on this matter, and the commission has approved recommendation of this resolution, and staff supports that.
Okay, great, thank you. That's all my questions.
Well, the other thing to keep in mind is what technology does so quickly right now is change. And so we're worrying about this current technology and how it's going to work right now. But the technology we're going to be talking about that we're looking at as a city in 5 years may be different, in 10 years may be incredibly different. So I think we have to do the best job that we can for right now with the tools we have, and I think Mr. Grogan is doing this. And I would move approval of this contract. Oh,
Yeah, we
sorry.
haven't taken
I
public
will
testimony yet.
Stop, since this
Yeah,
is
withdraw
public. I
that-
forgot we're on.
withdraw that
I will
motion.
withdraw my motion.
Thank you. Mr. Grogan, your recommendation as counsel for us?
My recommendation would be for the city to approve the resolution as presented in the packet.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, this is a public hearing, and we're going to open this up for public comment at this time. If there's anyone in the audience who wishes to come forward and comment or inquire of the council regarding this matter, this proposed resolution, feel free to do so. Welcome.
Thank you. My name is James Groats, and I live at 5513 Park Place. I am a Comcast business class subscriber. I, like many other businesses, my livelihood, my living depends on this bandwidth. I have great concern over this because I've had a very rocky relationship with Comcast, which started out with my original contract being forged by the salesman. And it just got worse from there. It's very difficult it has been very difficult to get things resolved with Comcast, and they have far greater financial resources and far greater staff than the new company will have. I went from a forged contract to a billing snafu. I had probably a year's of time of negotiations and to get this resolved. Then, of course, we went to the modem. Everybody had to buy their own modem, or they started, charging us for a modem rental. And I went out and bought my own modem, and the company for another 9 months continued to charge me to rent my own modem, which took a great deal of my time, effort, and energy to get that resolved. My concern is that this has just been my constant experience. The bandwidth has been okay. They've played a lot of games on the speeds. And I want you all to know that it has not been good as a business class subscriber. And we pay more for our service just for the line and the bandwidth, but yet our speeds are lower than even the base level consumer speeds. And they play games with the speeds on us. So therefore, I am very concerned about this, and I would urge you to go very slow on this and not necessarily adopt this tonight. But state you are interested in adopting it. I note that one of the new council members coming up at the next meeting is an SEC corporate attorney, and I certainly, as a citizen, would like to have his input on this. I have some questions for the attorney on this, and what I did is I went through briefly that information that was provided in the council material. Here's my first question. In this transaction, what contractual safeguards has the commission required in the contract?
Mr. Gross, if you asked all your questions,
Okay.
we'll write them down, and then when we close the hearing,
That's
we'll
my
answer.
first one. My second question is, what penalties for failure to perform are in this contract? Third question is, what reserves or letters of credit are in the transition contract to protect us? And fourth, if we all have bad experience during this period of time and there's a lot of subscribers lost, what impact will what possible negative impact will there be to the city's franchise fees? So I'd like to get those questions answered.
Thank you, Mr. Gross.
Thank you.
Good evening.
Good evening, Mayor, members of the council. Before I start, just take a moment to thank Josh and Joni for their service to the city. Thank you very much. I have two questions about this transition. One,
your name and address, please.
David Van Dongen, 5620 Kellogg Place.
Thank you.
We talked about a transition from Comcast.net emails to the new account. I would just ask that you ask for a 1-year transition period to allow that to happen? And as an alternative to businesses changing the cost of, incurring the cost of that transfer, could they pay a fee just to maintain that email account? That would be an option. The second question is, what is the current annual franchise fee, and how will that change with the transition to the new company? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, David. Anyone else?
Make a motion to close the public hearing.
Second.
Got a motion and a second to close the public hearing. Discussion. All those in favor of closing the public hearing, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, say nay. Carried. Did you jot those questions down?
I did.
I got the first one was dealt with contractual protections.
Yes, Mayor, would you like me to just kind of run through
Sure,
those?
if
as I understood
if
those?
you've got a list, go ahead.
Sure. As I understood the first question, what contractual safeguards have we put into the resolution is what I understood. I identified those in my presentation, but one thing I would mention is many of the enforcement tools that we have exist in the contract that we adopted 2 years ago. We have pages on our ability to impose liquidated damages for failure to perform, all the way down to, for material breaches, the ability to revoke the franchise after an appropriate hearing before the council and due process for the cable operator. So those contractual safeguards exist. We don't necessarily have to repeat those in the resolution. By having them agree to comply with the terms of the franchise, those carry forward and they step into the shoes of Comcast just as they would if Comcast remained the operator. That kind of addresses question number 2, which is what penalties would there be there for a breach of the resolution? All the penalties that exist in the franchise, and in fact there is a specific outline of that in the resolution. I can pinpoint that for the council members. It is on page 3, subparagraph H. New grantees' compliance with the requirements of paragraph C, D, E, F, and G of this resolution shall be handled under the franchise, subject to all enforcement remedies and enforcement procedures that are available in the franchise. So we've even spelled it out on top of the fact that as a member of that contract now, or a party to that contract, we'll have those enforcement tools. Third question is whether we have any set-aside financial letters of credit or other enforcement tools in the transition resolution. Again, that ties back to the franchise itself, where we have both a letter of credit and a bond, and as the new company steps in, Comcast's obligation to maintain those will be relieved, but the new company will have to post all of those same security tools. So we do have that covered. And then if we have a bad experience, I think the question was, if a customer has a bad experience, will there be a negative impact on the franchise? And I can say that the franchise, again, only speaks to cable television issues. So we have a fair amount of authority to deal with any adverse service issues on cable television. But on telephone and broadband, we simply don't have the legal authority. The state regulates the telephone service through the Public Utilities Commission. And as I described, only the feds really regulate the broadband service, at least as the law sits today. So we don't have anything further on those issues. And with respect, Mr. Mayor, to the next 2 questions from the second presenter, could we mandate a 1-year transition over email and perhaps even allow for the payment of a fee to maintain the Comcast.net email? Again, because we don't have regulatory authority over broadband, it's very difficult, if not impossible, for us to condition an approval of a cable franchise over a provision of service that we don't have regulatory authority over. And then the final question was, what would be the impact on the franchise fee? It should be a revenue neutral issue. They will step in and pay the franchise fee, the new cable provider, just as Comcast has, under the exact same definition, under the exact same terms. So it should be revenue neutral, assuming no loss of subscribers. Of course, if they lose customers through this transition, then it will have an adverse impact. Loss of customers will result in a decrease in the overall payment.
Right. There was, thank you for that recitation. There was also an inherent concern, I think, built in Mr. Grotz's presentation about we're moving too fast. Is there a timing issue here?
Well, we have a specific deadline of January 15th. In terms of the Cable Commission, the meetings are, last night I was in Richfield, earlier tonight I was in Hopkins, and now in here. I'll be honest with you, it's partially my ability to get to every city to be able to provide this presentation within that deadline. And on January 5th, I'm already going to be at 3 different meetings to try to finish this within that time period. So I could certainly seek an extension. I can't make a guarantee that that would be granted if there's a desire for more time. But I will say my own personal opinion is I'm not sure what more we can obtain during that time period, because we have the commissions already has taken action, and other cities. By the way, we are not the first to be taking action on this. There's plenty of other cable commissions around the city that have already moved on this or are in the process of moving at it. So the blunt answer is I'm not sure what more I could accomplish in this, although I certainly don't want to suggest to you that you don't have the discretion to delay this and consider it further. We would just try to get an extension and come back later in January and reassess.
All right, thanks, Mr. Grogan. Anyone else have questions for Mr. Grogan? And now, Member Swenson.
I'll still make my motion to support this.
All right.
Second.
Discussion. Member Bennett.
It appears from some of the questions and comments tonight that we know that people have frustration, and thinking in an organizational way or where the pressure points are in the system, it appears that in this country, the pressure point is not at the city council level. It's at the congressional level. I know they do it differently in Europe. I know the cable in Europe is a public utility and different companies that are more competitive. But that's not the system we have in the U.S. So if the system can be, I hear, it is very problematic, but the pressure to change that system, I think, isn't even properly applied at the state legislative level, but in Washington. Would that be correct?
I think that's fair. I think particularly for a transaction like this that touches almost every major market in the country, the key pressure point is going to be at the Federal Communications Commission. And I can describe to you what would happen if we did choose to deny. I think in all likelihood the transaction would still close. It's not going to be delayed for a given city nationwide. They would carve us out, and they would likely, since they'd have no employees here to operate this system, they would simply subcontract with Midwest and with Greatland to do exactly what this proposal is, and then we would be in court fighting over whether we had sufficient basis to handle the denial, which gets to the issue of if the ultimate goal is to keep Comcast here and to deny it for that reason, I'm not sure we, frankly, are in a position to undo this deal. That will be decided by the feds, and I think that's your point, that's the pressure point.
Well, and also if the goal is better service, again, people have their individual relationships with the company as subscribers, and that's another point at which pressure can be made. And then there are the regulation or the fines, the ability to terminate even the franchise agreement in the city's contract, but that requires that certain levels of lack of performance be met.
Exactly, and those will still be there, and this council will still have the discretion to enforce those. And the commission, will likely be taking a very close look at this transition, trying to give you very regular reports to make sure that you keep an eye on that.
Thank you.
We make a substantial amount of money with this cable franchisee, or franchise operator, I should say. And you want it to feel like a partnership.
And that was one of the questions,
It doesn't feel that way, even though we have a substantial pecuniary interest in this. But I think, so I think for folks it's generally frustrating, and then to not have much control as a city. But nonetheless, it seems like with your recommendation and the recommendation of our city manager and Member Swenson and the rest of the members of the Cable Commission, it seems like a fait accompli to me. Member Brindle?
If I remember correctly, one of the questions asked during the public hearing was how much the franchise fee is. Do we know?
We know that.
I personally cannot tell you off the top of my head. I know that at the percentage, it is 5% of the gross revenues that the company derives from cable services. We do not receive a franchise fee on telephone revenue or on broadband revenue, again, because we don't regulate those two. So only on the video piece, and it's 5% of gross. I don't know what that number equates to.
And the annual franchise fee revenue is somewhere in the neighborhood of $750,000 on an annual basis.
So it is significant.
It's a significant revenue. It's a general revenue of the city. Right, plus PEG fees on top of that, which were part of the most recent franchise renewal.
All right, we've got a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor of adopting Resolution 2014-164, which approves the transfer of the cable franchise and change of control of the grantee with respect to Comcast, everybody in favor of it, say aye. Aye. Opposed, say nay. Carried.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Grogan. All right, we are now back to the item 8B, which is the consideration of the 2015 to 2019 capital improvement program. And Mr. Ragaman, our Director of Finance, has this matter.
Mayor and members of the City Council. The city has a process to update our CIP every 2 years. The process for the current staff recommended 2015 to 2019 CIP began in early 2014 with meetings between city staff and council to plan the process. Staff and council continued meetings several times throughout the summer and fall to discuss priorities and strategic objectives for the capital improvement plan. The staff recommended capital improvement plan was publicly announced on September 16th. A full copy has been available on the city's website since that time. In addition, we have solicited public feedback through the Speak Up Edina website. And tonight, staff is recommending that the council give final approval to the CIP for 2015 to 2019, and that action would direct staff to begin preliminary work on the projects identified as high priorities.
Questions for Director Roggeman? Member Brindle?
The new format of the CIP is great, because for those of you who aren't looking at what I'm looking at, there's a list of projects by department, and then there's a series of years across the top, and it's 5 years. And then the costs for each project then fall within the year in which that project is paid. What this CIP also does is identify the funding source for each of those projects. And some of those projects have several funding sources. And some of them, as I've noted, just looking at the 2015 projects, are unfunded or undetermined in their funding. And some of the projects that are undetermined sound like they could be essential projects to me. Construction fund paying for the additional skid steer, salt storage facility, cold storage improvements, seal coating, so some public works and some seal coating. Now, specifically to seal coating, am I correct in, and I'm assuming I'm correct, that seal coating a roadway makes the pavement, protects the pavement, makes it last a little longer, good, gives it a new surface. So I guess I'm concerned about the fact that projects in public works and engineering are unfunded. And looking at any budget, whether it's your personal budget or this being the city budget, if we're coming up short on projects that are important and essential, what are the measures that we need to take? I don't know that we can delay other projects. We've been doing that for 6 years, and And so I guess I'll just put that out there, that it's a concern to me, that I don't know. I mean, I don't know if that's part of a levy. I don't know what it would take to fund the projects that say unfunded and undetermined, but fall under the category of essential.
Thanks for your comments, Councilmember Brindle. I think that was one thing that staff really noticed too as we went through the CIP process this year, is that we identified a lot more needs in the city than we had funding available to pay for those needs. And so the prioritization process was particularly difficult this year.
I don't think that's different than anybody's budget, whether it's a corporate budget or a family budget, but the numbers are just bigger here. So, and the consequences are bigger because they affect all of us.
Thank you. Member Bennett.
Thank you. I found the chart format really helpful, as I have in the past. The addition of the funding source and the prioritization is very helpful. I'm not a fan, and I had sent my comments to Director Rodman, of the text, because in the past we've had them in sequential order and you could flip around and find the project justifications more easily. Now that things are out of sequence, I did some hunting, and fortunately had kept the list, and so I had the page numbers written down. I had a number of questions, and thank you for taking time to answer them and getting answers from other staff members. They've all been very helpful. There are just a couple of general observations that I'd like to make in addition to the ones that Member Brindle has made. And they are that in the past, one particular notable project, the pedestrian bridge over TH62, was in the CIP in the amount of $3 million. We had some discussion at our work session this evening about the inadequacy of that pedestrian bridge for moving from the southeast quadrant to the northeast. It's out of the CIP now. And I understand that some at-grade improvements are going to be attempted under the bridge, but I note a shift in general more toward development-related things and less toward that kind of quality of life day to day. For instance, the parking lot ramp expansion of the north parking ramp at 50th and France, ultimately that's going to be an $8 million project. And we know from what's occurring in other cities that, for instance, Grand Avenue in St. Paul, that parking ramps are being folded into buildings. They have liner buildings on the outside. We know that subterranean parking is really expensive, but there are ways of redeveloping that are going on, again, not just in other parts of the country, but in this part of the country where the parking ramp does not end up being so prominent. And the cost of it, too, it's going to be for other people to discuss, but I just want that information to be there, to be noted, that I think that's a lot of money for parking ramps, and as we've discussed at other council meetings, over 60% of the use of the parking ramps in the Southdale area is for employees in the area. It's between 60 and 75%. So essentially, it's pretty heavy public subsidy for employee parking. Then there's land acquisition for Grandview again, the pedestrian bridge is out. And as we have considered different development and redevelopment projects over the years, people have had a lot of questions, but sometimes they go into two categories. One is, do we have the infrastructure to support the proposed development or redevelopment? And second of all, what is it going to cost? And in this CIP, we actually have a pretty good indication of what it's going to cost, at least in the Southdale area. There are 4 projects, 15-147, 15-162, 15-163, and 15-164, all of which provide for the expansion of sanitary sewer and domestic water capacity in southeast Edina. The funding sources are identified as utility funds, with all but $3.5 million of $11.645 million total either outside the rate study or undetermined. And I know there's going to be a rate study next year. If the cost of that expansion is shifted to the ratepayers, then essentially the other utility customers of the city, largely residents, are going to be subsidizing redevelopment. And I think the big question the bigger question, so there are those two questions. Do we have the infrastructure? If we don't have it, how much is it going to take to expand it or build it? And then the umbrella question is, who is the redevelopment for? And I know that it's for the future, but some things like parks, sidewalks, it's easy to make that line from the future. I mean, it's going to be used today. It's a pretty clear path. When you're talking about increasing density, then you're making a choice. And if that choice has a really big price tag that in turn is going to be passed on to the ratepayers or the taxpayers, I think that's something that people need to know up front. I think it's something that needs to be kept in mind as decisions are being made and approvals are being made. And anyway, I really appreciate the answers that made things clearer for me, but I did want to make those comments. I note that none of those projects is in the 2015 CIP, and so I am, with a very clear conscience, able to support the CIP for 2015, understanding that these are placeholders going forward, and that discussions about those projects will take place with future councils.
All right. Thanks for that observation. So when you have a 5-year CIP, the first year, in this case is 2015, that becomes part of the budget for the coming year. But the other ones, as Member Bennett points out, are placeholders. And the prioritization may or may not change with respect to 2016 or years beyond that. And there have been years where we have delayed or deferred projects or just canceled projects that are in the CIP. But nonetheless, an extraordinarily useful tool to have a capital improvement plan. Manager Neal.
Your Honor, I think the other way that the council could look at this document is this is a set of projects that you are telling us it's okay for staff to work on, and it's okay for staff to spend money to develop these projects, because in the end they're all coming back to you for an approval, for a bid award. We can't purchase land, of course, without you being directly involved in that. But what does happen when you approve the CIP is it gives us some authority as staff to change our workloads and to direct our activities, and that's very important to us, because you're giving us some pretty clear direction in your priorities that are in this CIP.
Yeah. Thank you for that comment. Anyone else have a question, comment? Member Sprague?
I just have a clarification on the traffic modeling for Greater Southdale. I asked before if this included an analysis of other modes of travel, and I thought that it had. Now it's sounding like it's more just for cars. Can you elucidate?
Yeah, Councilmember Sprague, there's two parts to it. I don't think it was the best written CIP line item in there. We definitely need to update the overall traffic model. But our thinking when we developed that CIP item, that there would also include some analysis of the overall transportation, not only automobiles, but other modes within that, to study it at that value that's listed on that CIP item.
And $125,000 is sufficient to cover both of those scopes?
We did talk to the consultant that runs our model and shared our ideas for a model and some of that transportation overall overarching look at the modes, and he felt it was.
Thank you.
Other questions? Staff or Director Roggeman? All right. We've done some good work on this. We've been working on it since May. And is there a motion to adopt the capital improvement plan for the period 2015 through 2019? We've got a motion and a second. Discussion. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed say nay. Carried. And next matter on the agenda is Resolution 2014-163, accepting various donations.
Second.
We got a motion and a second to adopt Resolution 2014-163, which requires the council to accept donations made to the city of Edina before they are indeed accepted. Any further discussion? All those in favor of adopting the resolution say aye. 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 Opposed say nay. Carried. This reporting period, we've got donations to the Art Center, the Braemar Golf Course Memorial Fund, to the City of Edina, to Public Art, and then a gift to the Park Department that I'm going to single out here from the Vote Sprague Committee. It's leftover campaign funds that Member Sprague is donating to the Park District. So thank you, Member Sprague. Thank you. All right. The next matter we have in front of us, we had a conversation about 2 weeks ago, and we sent some inquiries and some directives to Director Teague, and he has come back with some ideas now so that we can continue our conversation on 7200 France. The public hearing is closed. We did get comments from follow-up comments from our meeting 2 weeks ago from many of the interested people in the neighborhood in particular, and I'm sure that some of the rest of you did this as well, but I spent an hour and a half in the car with some of the neighbors on Saturday afternoon as we drove around and looked at various issues. So, Director Teague, do you want to handle the matter from where you are?
Yes, thank you, Mayor, members of the council. This item was tabled at your last meeting, and you had directed staff to prepare findings and resolution for approval of both the comprehensive plan and the preliminary rezoning. So those are the two resolutions that are in front of you this evening. The first one, Resolution 2014-150, that's the comprehensive plan amendment. And per the council recommendation, the height of the building has been decreased to 63 feet. So essentially the resolution, there are three amendments to the comprehensive plan. The first is for building height from 4 stories and 48 feet to 5 stories and 63 feet, under the condition that podium height is utilized on both France and the west side of the project. The density is increased in the OR, the office residential area, from 30 units to 50 units, as long as at least 20% of a development includes affordable housing. And the third is to increase floor area ratio up to a maximum of 1.5, under, again, the condition that 20% of any project includes affordable housing. So that's the comprehensive plan resolution that's before you. And the second resolution, 2014-151, is the preliminary rezoning. And I've included conditions that were talked about from the City Council at the last meeting, and I'll just quickly go through a few of those. Again, the building height being limited to 63 feet. The project must include indoor and outdoor bike amenities subject to review and approval at the time of the final rezoning. The retail uses would be discussed and specifically outlined as part of a PUD ordinance. Again, that would be at the next step of the development process. The vegetation on the west side of the site would need to remain as demonstrated in the preliminary plan, and that area not be used for stormwater management or floodplain storage. Again, at least 20% of the project must contain affordable housing as defined by the Metropolitan Council. Sustainable design principles must be used. Again, the applicant is pledging to an energy savings goal of over 20% over the state energy code guidelines. Final rezoning would be subject to the PUD, a PUD ordinance amended just specifically for this site. And then lastly, the access issue. The council had conditioned that access need to be taken off of France Avenue for both the retail and the residential portion of the site. That condition does remain in the resolution before you. Staff, Director Milner and myself met with the Hennepin County Transportation staff, and they continue to indicate an unwillingness to allow that access out onto France. And they've provided 3 alternatives that were included in your packet, potential alternatives to that access. The one that would address the cut-through traffic issue would be that alternative B, that's creating a cul-de-sac out of 72nd Street. Again, just 3 options that the county has presented for consideration. But again, the condition that was suggested by the City Council at the last meeting does remain in the resolution before you. With that, we can stand for any questions that you may have in regard to these.
Member Bennett.
Thank you. Director Milner, has an OD study, origin destination study, been done for West 72nd Street?
It has not.
So we don't know. We can measure the volume, and I know that's been measured for the traffic study, but we don't know how many of those vehicles are originating in the neighborhood or across 70th, still the neighborhood, and how many might be coming a commuting trip, maybe heading to Southdale. We just don't know because that kind of study has not been done at this time.
Correct.
Thank you.
With respect to the proposed comprehensive plan amendment, some of the conditions that we discussed as possibilities, and I think one that the council thought was really important to consider was taking the pressure off 72nd, which is what Member Bennett just alluded to. So with respect to 72nd, if I jump over to past the comprehensive plan proposed amendment to the underlying zoning change to PUD, there's some restrictions there. It was unclear to me whether the restrictions or the conditions, I should say, included the boulevard on 72nd that would have precluded a left-hand turn out into the neighborhood. You did provide for some continued guest parking access off 72nd, but it's unclear from the conditions here that that boulevard that I think all of us thought was important is still in there as a condition. What are your comments on that?
You could add that as a condition. There is the condition 6 that's pretty general in nature in regard to the final development plans must be generally consistent with the preliminary plans, and that would include that boulevard style. But to be more specific, that could be a condition that's added.
All right.
Mayor, I think we should spec that out. I don't think it should be a general. I think you're correct.
Yeah. Okay. Member Bennett?
Director Teague's comment just led to another question that I had, which is that given Hennepin County's position on access from France Avenue, we don't have in front of us right now a design that incorporates access to commercial, to the level of parking that was supposed to be accessed by the commercial. We just don't have that design in front of us at this time. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
Member Brindle?
You know, at our last meeting, I mentioned a small area plan, which was the recommendation of the Planning Commission, and got some shaking heads up here, so I didn't push it. But I think that really would go a long way to study access to this site, what could happen with a neighboring site. We know we have a letter up here that came today that is from a gentleman who is associated with the property to the south. So there are some discussions happening between the owners of the two properties, the owners of 7200 being here, and the owners of 7250. I don't know who they are, but Frauenschuh does represent that property. Whether they're the owner or not, I don't know. But I think the link to finding out how 7200, if it is to be built, can be built in a manner that that manages the traffic to the neighborhood, which is, there are a couple of really loud themes in what we're hearing from residents, and that's certainly a big one. And the B alternative that we have up here that you have not seen, I'll describe to you, but it's not approved by the county. It's just something they said, well, of the three, I guess that might be the. But basically, 7200 would become a stub road. It would serve this development. It would serve the funeral home. And if you're coming out of your neighborhood, you'd be going east on 72nd, and you would be directed directly onto Linmar. And from there, you would go out Hazelton Road to get to France. So it would protect the neighborhood traffic, because anybody wanting to cut through has a much more inconvenient route to get through the neighborhood. So you make somebody do a couple of curves, and they'll probably find a different way to get, if they're cutting through. So from that standpoint, that option, I suppose, is attractive. But what we have on the front page of our packet, the county staff reiterated that they would not support access to the site from France Avenue. So there is that what we just mentioned up here. We don't have a plan that replaces the access to the commercial part of the building, because right now all we have is the off and on to France Avenue, which the county says they won't support. So I think the way to proceed with this is to look at the broader way to use both of those sites on that block. It's not that this is not a bad design. The alternatives for this, as you well know, are a new medical office building. And what happens in a new building? It gets busy. And you have multiple appointments per hour to all the offices that are in that building. Steve Brown testified 2 weeks ago and told us his professional opinion, he works in the business, is that there will be more traffic generated by an office building than there will be by a residential building. So I do think that's important to keep in perspective. So my strong preference would be for a small area plan in this area to look at what the tolerances are from a traffic standpoint, from an infrastructure standpoint, from a variety of, and certainly access. So that's my piece.
Okay, thank you. Member Swenson, your comments, thoughts?
Couple things. I can't support dead-ending 72nd for this project without a conversation with the neighborhood. I've heard a couple of emails that said that that's what they would prefer, but over what, I'm not sure. And since we didn't have an opportunity because we didn't have that piece of information last time, that to me is never a fallback on any of this. I think it would be good, though, to have a conversation with the county, because I think it's really important that there be write-ins and write-outs all along France Avenue. Otherwise, we end up with huge blocks of buildings and really difficult. Farther south than that, there are a lot of small office buildings, multiple ones per block. And there's got to be a better way to approach all that by car than sending people down every side street there is. So I don't think necessarily the first answer that we got from Hennepin County is one that even as a city we want to accept, whether it's for this particular site or any other site going down France. I think that access off of France is really important. We don't want France to be a superhighway. That isn't our goal. We want it to be through traffic, but it's not not a superhighway. So I can't support this with a fallback of closing off to the neighborhood. I could only support it if it came off of France. And I still struggle with its height. So that's where I am on this project, just personally.
Member Sprague, your thoughts as we advance the conversation here?
I actually think I would just leave the condition in with as staff has done here, and go back to the county and see if you can get that right in, right out. That was our intent when we approved it, and it hasn't changed from then. Certainly, you wouldn't dead end the street and thrust all the traffic on back on Linn-Mar without, again, having worked through that with the neighborhood. So I would still be supportive of the approval, adding the condition that you mentioned into it to specify what happens on the 72nd side from a design perspective, to continue to thwart access, but also to beautify that end of that street.
Thank you. Sure.
My other comment, I was writing a bunch of things about this today as I was sorting out my thoughts. In 2009, 2010, Southdale was in pretty bad shape. We had people talking about closing it, tearing it down, redeveloping the Southdale Shopping Center because it had run its course. And shopping centers, as a rule, just not doing what they did in the beginning. And is it time? Is it no longer relevant? And fast forward to 2014, after Simon Properties took ownership of Southdale, took their time to decide what made sense, and have done an amazing job of renewing Southdale. The result of that is exactly what you hope for when you have a renewal in an area, is that spurs development in the ring around that area. And that is happening, in spite of the fact that we have single-family neighborhood not far from Southdale that wants its protection. It wants to be a quiet neighborhood. So there is that conflict, I guess. We're happy about the renewal of the Southdale area. It is the single most important piece of and most valuable piece of property in our city. So goes the tax advantage, if you will, of Edina and living here. If that is allowed to decay, where would we be? We talked earlier about where we are with our increased tax advantage. So I'll just put that out there. It is a very touchy situation. I know that area. I'm very familiar with the Cornelia neighborhood area, and it's an area that wonderful place to live. You can walk everywhere from it, and but know that the renewal at Southdale does create a lot of opportunity, and we've got some buildings like we do at 7200 France that beg for redevelopment. So part of the challenge that we have up here is to decide just what that is and how to do it. So we're inching towards something, and I hope that we take the time it takes to study it and do it right and come up with something that is compatible.
Carrie, when you measure the height of this building now that it's at currently 63 feet, where is that height measured from? The street on France, correct?
It's measured from the existing grade adjacent to the building.
Okay, so can you give me, since that building and that land tends to dip down, can you give me an idea what that means?
Yeah, as it faces, it's measured from the front setback, so it would be toward France.
Okay. So can you describe where the starting point of 63 feet is? Is it at the sidewalk?
Well,
that would be there?
It's an elevation, the existing grade adjacent to the building. I don't have the plans in front of me, but that's how that measures.
Are you asking if it's at street level?
Yeah.
If it's from street level, it's actually shorter, is what you're thinking, because
no. If it's down below the level, street level, it's lower. So I want to know where that 63-foot height ends up.
It looks like the development team is pondering that question, if I could ask them to.
Okay, well, we're working on putting this together. That may be some assistance to us here as we think about height. We had a town hall meeting a week ago Saturday that was scheduled to run from 10 to noon, and I think I left there a little after 2 after having a good conversation with Mr. Chamberlain out in the parking lot. And I think from 12 to 2 or 2:30 it was good conversation with the neighbors. Last Saturday, I had Paul Rosenthal and Harvey Turner pick me up along with Mrs. Campbell. We drove around for an hour and a half, and it made me think about, and also a conversation I had with Clean Wolf in the neighborhood, it made me think about, I don't generally share, I've been remiss in not sharing what I see happening over time in your neighborhood, or what I see in terms of a vision for what it could be. And we drove around in the car on Saturday. We had that kind of conversation about creating connectivity on a non-motorized basis into the FRED, whatever the FRED's going to be. Enhancing the ability of folks in your neighborhood to move around on a non-motorized basis. Being able to walk over to France Avenue to access things easily there, whether they're on the west side or the east side of the street. Trying to minimize cut-through traffic. All of these things in my mind that enhance your neighborhood. So when you take it back down to the project that's being proposed on 72nd and France, you can't really think about that project in isolation. You got to think about it, at least in my mind, for the whole block. And that's what we talked a lot about on Saturday. In fact, this letter from Mr. Bongine, who is, I think, the owner of the 7250 building, indicates that we could have, they were willing to have a conversation, as Member Brindle points out, about some common access to the two properties. Now that sort of foretells to me that something could happen there. And so if something can happen there, it isn't a good idea to be master planning the whole block. Things that are really important to me from a transportation standpoint, from an infrastructure standpoint, what we talked about early on 72nd, creating that boulevard effect so that if there is an entrance into a guest area for a future housing development, that be set up in a way where those folks can't go into the neighborhood. The ultimate important thing is the one my colleagues have mentioned, and that is the right in, right out on France. It's critical. Now, you just can't, there's a lot of ways to have a conversation with the county. Let me put it to you this way. And it's not just at the staff level. There's other conversations that can be had at the county. So right in and right out on France that would serve both these properties is a really important consideration for me. Also an important consideration would be entrance-exit on Gallagher. If you were thinking about both these properties at the same time and how they work with the neighborhood, and you make sure that they're impact neutral or they enhance the value of the neighborhood, I think you got to think about Gallagher, and you got to think about right in, right out on France, and then to the extent there's any traffic that drifts into 72nd, that they can't come out of the project as a guest parker and turn left and go into the neighborhood. Those sort of transportation conditions would mean a lot to me and would help, in my mind, make the project work. I think retail is important. I know there was some debate about what about retail? And Member Swenson and I have had this conversation, and I think she's right on the mark. First, you need retail for vitality along the street. I think you need it. I think it's a value enhancer for your neighborhood because now you can walk over and go to a nice restaurant, a casual restaurant. You can go over and go to a yoga class, maybe to a wine bar. I don't know what the possibilities are, but the point that Member Swenson would make is that the retail needs to be the come and stay for a while kind of retail. It can't be the dry cleaner where people are trying to get in and out of there. It's a little bit too complicated. So if we were going to try to advance this thing forward, where we gave the developer a chance to have a broader conversation with the owner next door, and we injected ourselves into that conversation. What do we got for time on the clock here?
February 3rd is the 120-day deadline.
120-day deadline. Right. So what I'm thinking is, let us go back to the county. Let us go have an earnest conversation with them now that we know the owner next door is interested in common ingress egress, and see if we can figure something out. And maybe between this developer and that owner next door, who knows what the possibilities are in terms of what comes out of that in terms of a acquisition or a joint venture. But it allows us a little bit of time to see if this thing with the county will work, see if there's a possibility of having Gallagher work for us, because we've taken on a broader project potentially.
So you're talking about working with Jan Callison, our representative on the county.
Correct.
Too.
Correct. So I would be in favor of a condition, if we decided that we were going to approve an amendment to the comprehensive plan, that it be conditioned on that right-in, right-out on France. And the other things that we talked about, that would be part of that sort of base amendment. But if you can't get past the comp plan, you don't even need to get to the PUD. So you could impose the conditions on the comprehensive plan amendment, and if we can't get there, then we got to figure out something else. But to me, as I'll back up one more time, to me, housing is a value enhancer to your neighborhood as opposed to a medical office. At worst, it's value neutral. But I do believe firmly that housing is a better thing for your neighborhood than a medical office building. So, in the long run, those are my kind of thoughts that have been roiling around in my head over the last 2 weeks. Member Bennett.
Thank you. I actually found the area quite walkable and spent about 2 hours walking on Saturday from 70th and Cornelia over past Think Bank, over to York, and the promenade down to the bridge south of the medical building on France, and over to the west side of the school playground. And my observations are that I think housing is a good fit, but the density of the housing will matter. I'm less sure about retail than I was a couple of weeks ago, because it's a pretty quiet, on a Saturday afternoon, it's a pretty quiet side of the street, and it's amazingly quiet 1 block off of France. And not that things stay the same way forever, but there's the question of how do you enhance or protect or fit in with. And the Cedars, which I think is the apartment development that's just west on Gallagher, that seems to fit. So I don't think I think housing does fit. I think the scale and the mass will be important. And I think all the lawyers in the room are going to know what the term ripeness means, and something has to be ripe for a decision. And because we don't have a design in front of us that is workable as far as we know at this point, I don't think this is ripe for decision right now. Also, the recommendation on 72nd Street, the very first council meeting I ever attended was in 1993, and it was because the neighborhood to the south of mine wanted to close off streets. Those of you who are familiar with southwest Minneapolis know that you can't go 4 blocks unless you know it's Chowan, by the way. You can get through on Chowan. But people go in to visit a friend. They get lost. They come back out to France. They add to the congestion on France. That in turn sends more people off into the neighborhoods. And you'll notice that Minneapolis really hasn't built another diagonal diverter, at least not in neighborhoods, since the 1980s. They're expensive to remove once they're in place.
I lived in that experimental plowing area, which is what they called it.
Okay.
It didn't work very well.
Okay. And I think there are other forms of traffic calming. There are other ways to manage speed. Volume is very unpredictable, and that's why an origin-destination study is so important before any kind of decision is made with respect to 72nd Street, because at this point there's no entrance and exit to the neighborhood at the west. There's no entrance and exit to the neighborhood to the south. There are only 2 entrances and exits to the neighborhood on the east, and it's all otherwise 70th Street. And if one of those 2 is closed on the east, you can't really predict up here, and staff can't even really predict which way people are going to go, but we can know that between people who are trying to get off 70th getting lost, as well as people from the neighborhood trying to get out of the neighborhood and go about their daily lives, there will be more traffic in front of other people's homes who don't have that amount of traffic right now. So probably better to look at what can be done with 72nd in terms of design, and to my colleagues' points, look at France Avenue, work with Hennepin County, and look at Gallagher. Because Gallagher is reconstructed. Gallagher has the bike trail there. Gallagher has the stoplight. The area itself is pretty walkable right now. The sidewalks that have been added, the pathways that have been added, make it really pretty easy to move around even on it was gloomy, and then the sun kind of started to come out. But so again, what will enhance the area, not detract from it? And I want to say one thing about affordable housing, because that is something fairly dear to my heart. And
We have a lot of lower wage jobs in this community. We have almost as many people leave the community every day to work as come into the community to work. And some of the people who come in are doctors and surgeons and lawyers, but also nurses and teachers and medical aides, I think LPNs, nursing assistants, retail jobs. And I don't think we want to be the community that says, you can work here, but we don't have any responsibility to share with the metro area in helping to house you. Just from a self-interested perspective, we don't want to be that community because that's part of what congests our roadways twice a day. But I also don't think we want to be that kind of community because I think we are part of a greater community that is connected with roadways and a sanitary sewer system. And I think we do have some obligation to be participating in the housing of the people who work for us and with us on a daily basis. So I like the idea of housing. I like the idea of affordable housing. I understand that there may need to be some shifting of rules. That was what I was trying to say 2 weeks ago, is we've shifted rules for a lot of projects. I haven't voted in favor of them. I haven't seen the public benefit. In this, I do think there's a public benefit. I think affordable housing is a public benefit. I think it is one of the obligations of the community to help provide housing, again, for the people who work for and with us. That being said, I don't think this is ripe. I don't think it's at a point where I can make any kind of decision on it, either from the roadway access perspective or from the design perspective, because if that design has to be changed for access, then the design we have in front of us is not the design that's going to be built.
That's an accurate statement, that we don't have a design in front of us that can be built.
That's right.
So we've got February 3rd.
How does that get extended?
By the developer.
By the developer.
Okay.
So it seems to me that the whole thing turns on our ability to have a conversation with the county that's effective in getting it right in, right out, common to both properties. While we worked on that, the development team for 7200 could continue this dialogue with 7250. We can have a conversation with 7250, try to get a greater understanding of what Mr. Bonjean is thinking about here. But it means not voting on the project tonight, because everything is contingent upon that right in, right out. Is that kind of the sentiment of the council?
Yep. If I had to vote tonight, I would have to vote no, just because there are things that really need to be answered. So I would prefer not to vote.
Bear with me a second.
Yeah.
Ms. Boyclair or Mr. DeVolis, Adam, Mr. Serafine, one of the three of you want to come up and comment on what we're thinking about in terms of how it could potentially work for you, or because I think the council wants to know up here if there are issues that we missed from a timing standpoint, because everything's, you can see that everything in our mind is critical relative to everything hinges on the county cooperating with us.
Just let me introduce myself, Dean DeVolis, DJ Architecture, 5009 Ridge Road, Edina, Minnesota. And Lord Ham, I'd like to speak. I want to answer a few of your questions about the plan. Do you have a plan in front of you? And Carrie, could you, or it'd be kind of to put up the presentation. I just want to show a few things here in terms of the project. So bear with me when I scroll to find the piece here. Going the wrong way, so hang on one second. And let me go to the site plan, because the site plan actually, let's see if I got the one that shows here. This is a better one right here. In terms of access and the right in, right out, which I agree with council on that position, and I disagree with Hennepin County, because I think the more you take access off France Avenue, the less it becomes a street that'll be viable for any type of scaled commercial or residential development. And so in some ways, the county is starting to redesign your city without you as a council having a say in it. So I think the access off France is critical for a bunch of issues beyond our project in the standpoint. In terms of the design, when we set this up, we actually set it up, and the reason why we put the commercial entrance here initially was for the idea that it could, in future, work with the building next door, 7250. And so that was the intent to why that's sort of set up in that location. Given this plan, the revision we make is this garage entry would be eliminated here, and all the traffic would come in at this point. We'd only allow guest parking on this portion right here. We'd keep the boulevard, as you suggest, which makes sense, and this would become a common entrance conjunction of both buildings. An idea why this connection, and if this would ever be redeveloped, the idea is our parking garages that could tie together, so there could be an access off Gallagher. So in some ways, this plan was set up for that future, is what I call the present plan, because if it came back and said, what's your new plan date? It would be this plan, less this garage entry, with all traffic coming in here off of France. That would be the change that would make to it. So it's basically, this is a configuration I would come back to council with. So I respectfully agree. I think you basically have the direction that this will be. Just this garage entry would be eliminated, you see right here, and all the connections would be at this point. So that's one point I want to make. Lori and Adam, you want to add anything? So I just want to get that across, so thank you.
I don't think we need to hear from all of you, though.
No.
Okay, good evening. We were just having a brief little conversation because that's a very loaded question. Our question back would be the next vote would be in January. Is that correct? We know we have the February 3rd deadline.
Right.
Meeting that we've had with other staff members and putting a calendar together on when this project could actually go into dirt, waiting to the February 3rd, the end of our 120 days, brings us into a whole new calendar year for actually starting construction if we were to do the multifamily and move forward with the multifamily. That is our preference, obviously being soldiers of affordable housing. Waiting till the February deadline and seeing, or asking you to vote tonight because we do have an alternate plan that does work is a very tough question. So if you're looking for a solid answer, we can't answer that.
All right.
We, would like to have a direction from you.
I think you will shortly.
So I think we will, yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, so the reason I asked for the deadline date was it wasn't necessarily to set the next hearing date. It was to find out how much time we have to try to work with the county. And if we're successful with the county, if this is the direction the council would like to go, then we can start to work with the county at both the political level and the technical level. And then we'll try to act as expeditiously as we can so that maybe we can get to this by the second meeting in January. But that was the reason I asked for that timing issue, on that timing issue. All right. Member Swenson.
I just asked Manager Neal what our timeline would be to put together a group to talk to the county, and it really is after the new year kind of thing because of the three people that we need to get together with there. I certainly will volunteer to take it on. I know that our supreme leader goes in for knee surgery tomorrow, but I'm thinking that we can work around your schedule for that first week. But I'll be your backup for it if you'd like. And we'll pull in Jan Carlson and Grubner and Chad. And
I think it'll be important.
And I think we have to have an answer by then or not, I think really is what, I think it's come down to make a decision. Yes, Member Bennett.
I do think that you made a very important point, which is that if all access points are removed from
Yeah.
France Avenue, it is going to contribute to the sense of tunnel and
Yep.
speed.
Yep.
And so there is value to well-designed access and entrance points off of France.
Well, which is one of the reasons I'm volunteering to head this up, because I think that it's a really important thing that we go to bat for right now with the county.
I'll help on it too.
I know you will.
Yeah. So, and that's actually the point you just made is a great one that Herbie Turner made several times on Saturdays. We don't want to have France Avenue walled off, you know. So, so this right in, right out becomes critically important for a lot of different reasons. So maybe a motion to table this matter until we should get a date certain here.
Well, unfortunately, our first meeting in January happens right away, which I don't think allows us enough time. So I think we have to put it on the calendar, unfortunately, for January.
Well, the 20th is the Tuesday.
February.
Right.
January
20th.
20th?
Yep.
Is that it?
Mm-hmm.
The second council meeting, because the first council meeting is the 6th, which is
What's the first council meeting in February? The
the
third?
3rd.
That's the 3rd.
We could table it to no later than the 3rd and move it up.
The schedule says the 6th.
I would rather table it to the 20th and have to move it to the 3rd if you
Agreed.
could work that way.
I think that'd
That
be
better?
advisable. Yep.
All right. So I'd entertain a motion to table this matter involving 7200 France until January 20th.
Yep.
Our meeting on January 20th, 2015.
I'll move that.
Motion and a second. Further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Carried.
Thanks for hanging in there with us, guys. Thank you, neighbors. I did. Josh, you make it, I seconded it.
You're just trying to help. This evening is a sketch plan review process for 4500 Valley View Road. And I can't believe somebody wanted us to get rid of that closed-up gas station, but here we go. Is somebody introducing the topic from our staff?
Carrie is.
Mr. Teague?
There really isn't much of a staff introduction. Really isn't much of a staff introduction to the presentation. We have advised them on how to do the sketch plan review, on the time allowed for it, and we ask them just to make their presentation.
Good. 15, 20 minutes, gentlemen? Work well for you?
Thank you.
Okay, good.
Yep.
Thank you.
Mayor Hovland, Council, I'm Peter Fitzgerald. I live at 5217 Kellogg Avenue. I'm a lifelong resident of Edina, with the exception of 4 years when I left for school. I grew up 3 blocks away from this property, and we still live in the neighborhood. And before my very brief remarks, I just want to thank Member Bennett and Member Sprague for your service to our city, and thank you very much for that. As a neighbor and a commercial real estate consultant to the owner of this building, it's been a vision of mine to try to revitalize this area. And I would say I'm really excited about the direction it's headed. We've been working very hard to find the right tenant and the right partner for this gas station, and we think we found that. And we have a lot of confidence in this restaurant operator, who I'll introduce you to, Paul DeZubner, and his design team, Shea Design, which is one of the top restaurant designers in the country. They both have a history of great work. They share our vision of creating an outside patio eating area that activates and engages the corner. They also share our vision of creating a place that is welcoming to families, and also a place where friends can go get a beer. I think this is a great opportunity for the city, the property owner, who I represent, Fred Alice, and the restaurant operator, the owner of the building, and the city to work together, because I think this corner can serve as a catalyst to improve the small area. I would encourage us to consider what things the city can do to help revitalize this area. And, you know, I've been a part of this small area plan that the city has commissioned, and, you know, we hired a consultant, and we've been trying to listen to what the neighbors have said. And we've been trying to listen to what Planning Commission has said. And one major theme that I have heard, at least the loudest, is creating the sense of place at this corner, at Valley View and Wooddale. And I interpret that, it can mean a lot of things, but I interpret that in part as creating a welcoming area for people who want to walk there, who want to bike there, obviously who want to park there, but creating the sense of place with boulevards, sidewalks, benches, I should say, lamp posts, signage, but working together, both the building owner, the restaurant, and the city working together to create this sense of place. And I think it's an appropriate time to at least raise the idea for discussion of the TIF fund that I believe exists for this neighborhood, this area. And I just think it could be used to respond to what the neighbors are saying about this area, and it would be a great example of you know, both private and public working together. So with that, I'd like to introduce Paul DeZubner, the restaurant operator, and also Chuck Nolan with Shea Design to make some comments.
Thank you, Mr. Fitzgerald. Good to see you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Chuck Nolan. I'm the architect.
Welcome,
one of the
Mr.
architects at Shea Design. I would like to present the drawings here.
Sure. We'll get you a handheld microphone if you want to.
All right, let me begin with this design. Hello, testing. Okay, very good. This is the corner of Wooddale and Valley View Road. What we're proposing here is a restaurant in the existing gas station, do a remodel. We've already been through the Planning Commission, and things have changed a little bit based on their comments. So we are listening, and we will continue to do so. Okay, this is the current mall. This is the corner. One of the things that has changed is creating more green space along with a boulevard and sidewalk. Originally in this corner we had a rain garden, and we believe that it would be better utilized now after viewing the small area report with art feature and bike racks, as well as bike racks here. If you look at the outline, here is the existing gas station, and we would be planning to keep the entrance, and this is the area for a retractable awning and patio. The only real addition we would be adding on is a screened enclosure for the trash and storage. So this is one way to kind of keep that gas station as an existing landmark. Now, if we go into the inside, once again, I think we're going to keep that entrance, the garage doors, create a host stand area with a to-go counter, and then create a restaurant proper with a bar that can be indoor, outdoor. And here's where we're showing the patio. And this is all very schematic. We have just begun the design here. But what we're hoping to do, as Peter pointed out, is use this as a catalyst for the small area plan to jumpstart where the city of Edina can be in 20 years from now. What we're proposing here is our art sculpture, but really it's all about the porch area. When David Shea talks about this project, he talks about it being this photo right here, which is really about community and having outdoor space and something with people to activate that corner. And I think that's our goal here. Paul?
Thank you, Mr. Nolan.
Good evening, I'm Paul DeZubnar, and I would be the restaurant operator at the site. Overall, the concept is an American fare concept. It has 24 or so beers on tap, 28 wines by the glass. It has full liquor service, but really it's a place for connecting people and a place for gathering for the community. You could go there with your family, you could go there with a buddy to watch a game and have a beer. And so it's a pretty universal concept, and I have a decent amount of experience creating these. We have the Twisted Fork Grill on Grand and Haviland by St. Thomas, two of our town hall concepts that we have, one in South Minneapolis by Pepito's and one by Nakoma Shoes, where we converted an old bowling alley. We've done this before, where we've created gathering spaces for the neighborhoods. So we're very familiar with how to take buildings like this and convert them, and also how to create a sense of community within our establishments. I'd answer any questions that you have.
Questions for Mr. DeZubner?
Sure.
Mary Bindle?
All right, parking. You're in a parking lot.
Sure.
Would it be shared parking with the shopping center, or would this be dedicated parking to the restaurant?
When we first when we came to the Planning Commission last week, we had parking right on our spot. And the direction we received from the Planning Commission was that currently the overall strip mall parking is inefficiently laid out, and that the small area plan outlined that corner to be the highlight, for lack of a better term, the pinnacle of the small area plan. They did not want parking on there. So that made me happier as the operator. Michael Schroeder, who's also an architect, I'm actually working on a project with him with the city of Chaska right now. He said the parking lot could be laid out much more ergonomically effective, and so we were hoping to use the shared parking.
All right, and what brought you to this location? How did you hear about this? I'm just curious.
I have family that lives 4,700 Towns area, and I've been coming to Edina for a long time. I've lived in Highland Park for the last 12 years and White Bear Lake since I was born, so I've been coming here a long time, and I love the area, love the neighborhood.
All right, as far as the building, so the covered patio, what happens to that in the wintertime? Does it get covered and enclosed, and that area is seating in the winter, or is that not seating in the winter?
Yes, it gets covered and closed, and that area is seating in the winter.
Okay, all right, so it's basically the same square footage all year long of seating.
Right, well, in the summer, what would happen is that would open up, it'd be outdoor seating, and then there's also some seating that goes around that patio itself.
Okay,
that seating goes away in the winter, the stuff outside of the enclosed patio, and then you're just left with the seating inside.
Okay. From a lighting and sound standpoint, you're across the street from single-family homes. You're
Sure.
not really adjacent to single-family homes. So, but from a lighting standpoint, what kind of lighting do you anticipate? And down lighting, or what are you going to use?
It's low level lighting in the one picture. If you just take the camera and come back to this really quick here, if you can zoom in, you have very low level festoon lighting like that, and then the sign is just the one sign that you have outside, whether it's illuminated by goosenecks or we keep the pylon sign that's there. It's not a lot. It's not intrusive lighting at all. We're doing a project right now at 40th and Lindale in an old SA gas station, and the lighting's very minimal there as well. From a
So-
sound standpoint, you'd have ambiance music in the background, and at best you'd have a couple TVs in the small space.
So the strips of party lights, that was one thing I was wondering. The strips of party light, that's enough light in the evening in the summer?
Sure. And those strips right there, one of our restaurants, we have it, you can go down as low as 11 watts and all the way up to 40, and it's plenty. Especially in the summertime, it stays light till about 10 o'clock at night.
Okay. All right. And do you have amplified music or anything? Or is it just the sound of the people?
No, you have, well, if you mean amplified music, meaning anything coming over speakers, we do have that, but it's background ambiance music that's, sufficient for, you can hear it when you're talking, but it's not overpowering, like most restaurants.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
I love the idea of the reuse. I love the idea of the vitality at the corner. There was a proposal some years ago, I think we all remember it, for a drive-through in a restaurant on the other side of the street, and people were really disappointed that the restaurant didn't materialize. The building got well reused, and this would be a wonderful complement, plus bring more activity to the corner. I am familiar with Wiseacre on Nicollet, and admire not only the way they've used the building, but also the way they've landscaped. Sure. Of course, they're across the street from Tangletown Gardens, which helps, but they actually have used a wall of the property, and they're hanging things that are almost made out of felt that will grow plants in the summer. And then they have some like artificial turf that they use on the patio. They're parking, I think they have kind of a flexible parking where there are more parking spaces in the winter and more patio spaces in the warmer months with the overhead doors that roll up. So to me, when I heard about this, that's sort of the mental image that I have. The only suggestions that I have are you might want to look at them for some ideas for landscaping, because I love the idea of landscaping that corner heavily, making it visually interesting, and also for, a draw for people to walk up to as well as draw to. Love the idea of the shared parking. The only part of the design that I'm not a fan of is I would love to see more windows on the street. Right now, your windows are back toward the parking lot. And I think so. So I'm looking at what is called A10 in our packet, and it shows, I think I'm looking, so the patio would face Valley View Road, and the prep area, the entrance would be near the corner, but then north of the entrance, it's prep, the cook line. So you're going to have a wall north of that. Your diners in the colder months in particular are going to be looking west at the parking lot and north at the parking lot. And if there is any, and not to design your project for you, but if there is a way to get windows on the street, I think it's both more advertising for you. You're going to have wonderful eastern light in the morning. Windows on Wooddale. Would love to see windows on Wooddale if that's... Anyway, that's my only suggestion. Otherwise, there was something else that I had. Oh, it was about the curb cut, and then your design addressed that. So good luck.
Thank you very much.
Well, this is my hood, so of course I'm really excited about this. I've already invited the mayor to dinner, but I'd love to see this here. I'd love to see the corner made pretty. I'd love to see the city work on that with you. So get to the Planning Commission. Goodbye.
It's a vast improvement to see the pedestrian connections being made at the corner to bring people in a different way just from walking through the neighborhood. And I agree with Member Bennett that the landscaping plan is going to be integral to really activating that corner. In the sketch plan, we see some big bushes. I'm thinking something more colorful and more varied than that's what's on the basic plan, and I'm sure that will be stepped up when you get to formal application, but I just wanted to make sure that comment is in the record. I also agree that it would be nice to get some type of additional light into the facility and views onto Wooddale. If full glass windows aren't available, then aren't possible, then maybe there's opportunities for transoms or something else just to break up the mass and also to get some of that easterly light into the building.
Okay.
I'm just kind of giddy about the whole thing, frankly. I just.
You don't seem giddy very
I think this is like the first step in the renovation of that whole corner, and as happy as I am that you're willing to come over to that corner and open a great restaurant, and Mr. Nolan's doing the great design work. I got to really thank Mr. Fitzgerald for being unrelenting in his desire to work with that owner and improve that corner at Valley View and Wooddale. He has been just a champion for years to try to improve that area, and this is a great start. And I'm sure the neighborhood will love it, being able to walk to a place that's so active and energized and with wonderful food, just as you characterized it. Go over there on a Saturday afternoon and have a hamburger and a beer and with your friends and watch part of a football game or whatever it might be. It's just going to be a terrific addition to the town.
Thank you.
Not prejudging it, but
Right.
it is a good one.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you very much.
All right. Correspondence petitions. Anything other than what we had on the dais this evening? Nothing came in between 7 and 10?
Ms. Mangan, we have a petition, but we're going to put that on the council's next agenda, right?
That's correct. I
Okay.
didn't put it on the dais for them to have a paper copy, and it will be on for them to formally receive it at their January 6th meeting.
All right. Aviation noise update. Member Swenson, Member Bennett, Manager Neal. Any comments?
I can tell you that we have initiated a request to the Metropolitan Airports Commission staff to invite them to present the noise study to the City Council. We're discussing some dates. It's possible that it might not be until February or even March, given their timeline. So we are looking at your calendar dates and comparing them to their calendar dates. But I did want you to know that's going on. There was a commission meeting actually yesterday, and one of the issues discussed by the commission does have some relevance to Edina and is something we should begin talking about, I think, at the council level, and then hopefully it gets into the discussion with residents as well, and that's the runway use system. And it's something that Councilmember Bennett and Councilmember Swenson have heard presentations about, but you'll be hearing more about this, the RUS, in days to come. I did ask a couple of commissioners who have interest in Edina to raise the question yesterday at the commission meeting about the RUS and how and when the FAA is following the runway use system, which is a general description of how planes either fly out on a northerly flow or a southerly flow, and attempts to balance those flows. I think what the presentation that we heard at the last NOC meeting is that those flows haven't been balanced over the last year, and I think we've all heard, and we know that that's true. We do want them to become more balanced, and so we are working with our colleagues in neighboring cities to try to make that more clear to not only the NOC but also the MAC and eventually the FAA. So we are pressing that issue with them, and we'll keep talking more with the council about that in the future. That's all that I have on aviation.
Member Bennett or Member Swenson, anything on that issue? Okay, good. Thank you. Council comments. Member Sprague.
Thank you. We attended the dome opening, which was great. And I guess the rink had opened sometime shortly before then. But we actually cut the ribbon just on the dome. But a friend of mine sent a picture of a U14 hockey team in the new backyard rink. And it just brought to mind why we do these things. These aren't buildings that just stand there for no reason. They're really strategic assets that go towards some vision or some goal. And again, as I mentioned earlier, the things that we've done recently with the dome and the fields and the backyard are about the kids. It's about youth development. So I wanted to share that picture with you. That's, again, a girls U14 team in that brand new rink.
Yeah, very good.
When I moved here in 2006, almost immediately I got involved. I got roped in, but I chose to get involved with some things in my neighborhood. Some neighbors were interested in redesign of a street, and we put together this vision. And it's funny because I look back at this now, just 8 years ago. This was before complete streets and all the movement towards multimodal and changing up the models about how we think and plan for transportation. And I look at this picture, and the city is moving towards this vision, one approval at a time. So anyhow, it's been a very event-filled 8 years since I moved here. And certainly the last 4 years have been packed with a lot of great initiatives and endeavors. And I just wanted to share a letter I wrote to my constituents recently. And it goes something like this. To my Edina friends and neighbors, thank you so much for the opportunity to serve the last 4 years as your Edina City Council member. It's been such a positive, enriching experience for me, and I am most grateful for the people I've met throughout the process. People that are dedicated to the common good and to giving back to the community that they love so dearly. That would include all of you on the dais, of course. To keep the city thinking and moving forward, we will need the continued participation of our residents. Please stay informed and involved with the issues that will impact our city in the long term, including Vision Edina and the Grandview redevelopment process. The positive changes that were wrought over the last 4 years are many and will impact the direction of the city for decades, far longer than any one council member's term. They include adding biannual resident surveys, annual council and board work plans, and new city code, improving the park system and providing amenities that support healthy living and youth development, improving energy efficiency, reducing waste, and protecting our water resources and natural areas, creating a transportation system that supports all modes and abilities, provides safe routes to schools, and encourages healthy living, supporting pedestrian-friendly, sustainable development that meets evolving needs, providing more avenues for engagement and collaboration with residents, including budget workshops, interactive online forums, town hall meetings, neighborhood associations, working groups, advisory teams, and biweekly council newsletters, strengthening operations at our enterprise facilities to make them more self-sustaining and reduce the burden on our overall financial system, and guaranteeing Edina remains a place where people of all incomes and backgrounds are welcome and appreciated. To amplify, we've passed an active routes to school plan, a living streets policy, new sidewalk facilities map for the comp plan, pedestrian and cyclist safety fund, neighborhood association boundaries and city recognition policy, golf consolidation plan, vision plan for Fred Richards, park strategic plan, and soon living streets implementation plan, Fred Richards Park Master Plan, Braemar Golf Master Plan, and the Park Strategic Plan. We've planned and built the Hornets Nest, the Sports Dome, the outdoor rink, and new high-quality fields at Pamela Park. We've collected more data than ever before on our resident preferences and needs, including 2 quality-of-life surveys, a Grandview District survey, and a Park Needs survey. And we've built many new sidewalks and bikeways, including a $4 million pedestrian project on France Avenue. There is so much to be proud of, but let's not stop to rest on our laurels. Let's keep the ball moving forward. Again, my deepest gratitude for the honor of serving you. I hope to see you in person around the city sometime soon. So again, the body of work of this particular group of people in 4 years and the staff to support it and the residents is just truly amazing, and I will be forever grateful for the experience. I want to share with you a couple photos from the last 4 years. That was right away when I roped Manager Neal into jumping into ice cold water with me and for the what was the name of the Polar Plunge event?
I noticed he hasn't done it again.
Yes. But you did it once, and that's what counts. The 125th anniversary with my colleagues here. That was a great event, and of course, Member Bennett was on the committee to help put that together. And then finally, our trip to D.C., another great life experience, but also a great advocacy work by council members on behalf of the constituents. So lots of great things, and again, more to work on going forward, including how do we make the greater Salto area a sustainable village for the future? How do we make those connections between parks to schools, between different quadrants? There's just a lot of transportation planning and development guidance that will continue in the future. So thank you. It's been a pleasure to work with all of you. Yeah. And I take my experiences with me on my journey, which will lead me back to my family and business who have allowed me to sacrifice quite a bit of time to fill this position. So, and finally, thank you to my wife and kids for allowing me to serve and to be involved with so many important initiatives that will guide the next generation of Edinians.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Okay, I gotta go after that one. I mean, it's not even fair. Okay, so I am reminding us all that this year's trip, and for you two guys out there, to Washington, D.C. is March, but we have to be there March 7th for opening round. But is that a leave in the morning on the 7th or leave on Friday to make it work?
Saturday works. Councilmember Swenson and those guys out there too. The date for the noise the date for the noise conference will be Saturday, but the time isn't been set yet. So sometimes they've held it in the morning right away, Saturday morning. Sometimes they hold it in the afternoon. So I am talking to the consulting team that puts that together, and as soon as we get them committed on when that's going to happen, then I think we
and
book
then
travel.
Stay through Tuesday and either come home late Tuesday or Wednesday.
Or Wednesday. Yeah.
Okay. So we need to let you know ASAP.
And Lindy will be kind of coordinating travel and lodging plans. And
Okay.
Rest well before that trip.
Can you then ask Lindy to send out an email to everyone who will be around in March?
Yep, will do.
And we can reply to her for that.
And last year, the noise event presentation was actually Sunday morning, and there were the congressional meet and greet when all the people came into the room was Wednesday morning, and so those of us who were flying out in the early afternoon on Wednesday were not able to attend that.
She's right. That's right. You're right.
So a couple things
So
to
it
keep
might
in
be a
mind.
Wednesday late afternoon, evening
Right.
flight.
So Saturday, probably a Saturday to Wednesday. But we'll get that confirmed
Confirm
with
that
them.
so
Yep.
that we don't miss that, both of those
I've had some
opportunities.
contact already with Lockridge Grindle. That's the firm that coordinates the noise group.
Okay.
So we are working on that.
We also had an email from someone that wanted to know how to get a sound wall built. And the information is that really to get a sound wall built, we end up having to pay for it as citizens at this point, and that's by petition. So I know that Councilmember Sprague sent him to engineering for a petition. There was another question.
Mangan.
Clerk
Yeah.
Mangan. And there was another question about resurfacing of Vernon, and since that's a county road, is that a county resurfacing project, and do we have a date in the future that they are interested in doing that? And he's most interested in the Grandview end of it, so from Highway 100 going west.
Yeah, they resurfaced from Eden to the west last year, so I can ask the county and see if they have
Sure.
plans for that
If
segment
they've
of
got
roadway in
plans
their
and you can
capital
give us an
improvement plan.
update, that would be great.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, that's all I've got.
Thank you. Member Bennett.
Thank you. A couple of housekeeping things. So you both, I think Member Swenson and Manager Neal, know that you all will need to pass a resolution in January designating Member Swenson the city's appointment to the at-large cities group of the Noise Oversight Committee.
And we have to have a letter signed by the mayor. We're working on that.
All right, and there should be an election coming up for the chair of the at-large cities group. Councilmember Bergman from Apple Valley, well, actually, he's midway through a third two-year term. However, the assistant chair or associate chair position is open. because that was previously held by Assistant City Manager Janelle Teppin of Inver Grove Heights, and she left that position with the city, and the Inver Grove Heights does now have a designee, but he was not elected to the associate chair position, so there will need to be an election for that. And then also, there has been some brief discussion with this group about forming an aviation working group or aviation advisory council. And if there is a way to tap some of the expertise that we have in our community and provide a little more structure for the communication out to the community on issues. I know we've been diligent about announcing them here, but I think in terms of coordinating or helping to coordinate what residents can advocate for on their own or what we can advocate for as a city, a group like that could be helpful. What I don't know is if we have the expertise that in a way that is willing to meet publicly. I know there are people with a lot of expertise who've been willing to speak frankly, but not for any kind of record. So that will be another challenge to be addressed. And I too want to leave with my thanks, which I expressed earlier. It's been an honor to serve. And I also wanted to leave with this thought, which is, as my husband and I were finishing our almost 5-mile walk last night, we were walking across 42nd Street, crossed France, and we encountered another gentleman in the dark. I didn't recognize him. I don't think he recognized us, and he said, "Great sidewalk, isn't it?" And that was one of the sidewalks that got constructed this summer, and because we did some creative looking at the financing and some good prioritization and didn't build on the other side of the street where there already were sidewalks, we were able to extend it past the project area, and so we were able to take it all the way back to Lynn. Thank you very much. It's a very well-used and much appreciated sidewalk. So again, very, very many thanks.
Thank you. Member Brindle.
I have a couple things. You've heard me talk recently about the I-494 Corridor Commission, and at our last meeting, we were looking at the fact that dues haven't increased for 5 years. So the member cities on the 494 Corridor Commission are Edina, Eden Prairie, Richfield, Minnetonka, and Bloomington. And so we are all going back to our cities and saying, can we please increase the dues by 2 cents to 30 cents a resident? Right now it's 28 cents a resident. The dues paid to the 494 Corridor Commission pay a couple of things. One is Messerly and Kramer are our legislative lobbyists, and they keep us informed. They carry our message to the Capitol. Right now, we are formulating the legislative slate of projects for 2015, which includes a couple of projects that were approved but not yet funded from last year, one being a 77th Street underpass connecting Richfield to the Mall of America, basically. So it's a huge project for Richfield. So it has begun and just needs to be completed. And the other is the added lanes, both directions on 494 in the Plymouth area. That's going to be a project that is going to be felt financially and otherwise. It's a project that will affect that area of 494 for 2 years while it's in process. So in addition to that, projects that this group lobbies for are projects that improve the conditions on 494 in the areas of traffic volume, in the areas of alternative transportation that affects traffic volume, encouraging alternative transportation, making bus routes available, advocating for new bus routes. The transit system here is largely a hub and spoke system, so pretty much everywhere you go to downtown to transfer somewhere. So we have begun to advocate for some east-west routes along American Boulevard
to parallel 494 so that people who want to go from one place to another along 494, who will not choose to take a bus to do it, could choose to take a bus to do that. So there are some BRT lines happening up from Lakeville, up from Shakopee. And so those some of the projects that the 494 Commission lobbies for. We have a TMO, which is a Transportation Management Office, and or a Traffic Management Office, and this TMO works directly with the businesses along 494 to set up carpools, to set up van pools, to make sure people have bus schedules. And the last full year of data we have is 2013, and 37 million vehicle miles have been replaced by alternative transportation. So those things get supported by the dues that are paid to 494. And so I'm making my case for the $987 increase that the 2 cents per resident will affect in Edina's budget. So I would like to move that, first of all, well, I'll move and then we can talk about it if you have questions. But I would like to make a motion that Edina accept the 2 cent, I don't know if I said per cent, but 2 cent increase to 30 cents per resident for the dues for the 494 Corridor Commission.
Starting when?
January 1.
I'll second it for the idea of discussion.
Okay.
Is it in our budget for this year that we just passed earlier this?
Yes, that occurred to me, but I did ask advice from my sage city manager.
Oh, what does that mean?
Yes.
Okay. We did have a discussion. That part of our budget is kind of a lump sum that includes a number of other areas with dues, and the $987 does not negatively impact that budget. So we could make this change with no other changes in our budget.
Then I'll support it.
Great.
I'll support it as well. They do excellent work.
It's a great commission.
All those in favor?
Yep. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those say nay.
Thank
Carried.
you. Appreciate that very much. If one city opts out, then it doesn't happen. So we all have to pass it. Let's see here. If there's anything else in my notes. There is not, but I would like to echo my thanks to both Joni and Josh. It has been a pleasure to serve with you. I fully intend that we'll do something together again in the very near future, I'm sure. I mean, you're too locked into things to totally give it up. So you've got knowledge, and you've got experience, you've got contacts, and you've got the passion. So you'll be doing stuff.
Good. Thanks, Mary. Just backing up in time a little bit, I made a presentation to all of the Edina Realty realtors about some of the things that were going on in town, kind of a mini State of the City presentation. That was on the 9th of December, same day that we cut the ribbon on the new Think Bank in the Saltdale District. And then the next day on the 10th, Manager Neal and I attended the retirement party for Mark Bernardson, who retired as the city manager of Bloomington after 23 years, and a stellar career, I would say. Outstanding city manager. Monday I gave the same sort of mini State of the City presentation to some seniors over at the Waters. Last Friday I attended, I got invited over to St. Paul, but a St. Paul Riverfront Corporation to participate in a healthy city design studio endeavor. And it was, I don't know, there were probably 25 people there, and it was an interesting experience. I'm waiting for the written material to come out. I'll share that with the council. But Catherine Bass was there on behalf of Blue Cross Blue Shield, and of course had much to say about her experience with Dewtown and in our own Transportation Commission. So that was an interesting little event. I was on a phone call today with the White House on their Maker Cities program. They were mayors from around the country on the phone, and it's something I want to learn more about and discuss with the council as we go forward. This Makers Fair, Makers Forums, or I think there were 85 of them held in cities around the United States last year. So as we work on all of these STEM issues that we heard about tonight, the kids working over at Precision Gasket, this same thing can be brought to a city in the form of a Makers Fair or a mini Makers Fair. And they're doing them in places like Dayton, Ohio, and Cleveland, and Louisville, but in smaller communities as well. So I think it's something worth thinking about in the future. So again, for Joni and Josh, thank you so much for all of these great years of service that you gave your town. All of us benefited from it, not only up here, but everybody in the community. So, excuse me, thanks very much. And then Lisa Katsky, our one of the hardest working reporters we've ever had at the Sun newspaper. She's everywhere. I said one of the. We understand that this might be your last council meeting. Oh, no. And you're heading up to Duluth. You know,
she's at a fun
you worked so hard in our town to bring the news to people. And covered so many stories that were important for our community to get great detail on. And no one provided the level of detail that you provided in recent years. I'm accepting Director Benarat. She did a great job too. So you guys were good bookends.
You're in the top two ever.
Yeah. So thanks for doing such a wonderful job for our town and for the residents in our community. We really appreciate it. And then the other thing I did on Saturday, I went over to the robotics meet at the high school. And so it was grade school kids, middle schoolers, and high schoolers. That was in the morning. There were 55 teams there from all over the metro. And see these kids, the grade school kids were working with Legos, the middle schoolers were working with Legos, and then some motorized Legos, and then the high school kids had some, I can't even begin to describe what they were doing with ping pong balls and golf ball sized balls. But the enthusiasm to just see all of the parents and grandparents there, and all these kids there from all over the metro. There's, I think we've talked about this before, there's more kids in robotics programs now than there are playing hockey in the state of Minnesota. And we love sports, but robotics, the kids that are doing all that STEM work, that's our future. Our city's future, our state's future, our country's future. So it was a great thing to be able to participate in, and best of luck to the Green Machine as they begin their season in January. Our high school team that has 6 weeks then to build whatever it is that the powers that be decide every team needs to build, and then they compete starting at that 6 week mark and probably in March. So that's it for me. Manager Neal.
Thank you, Your Honor. Just to say a couple things about the Weber Woods issue. We've continued our discussion about Weber Woods. We will continue to have that discussion with the City of Minneapolis, along with our friends in the City of St. Louis Park. So even if we're not talking about it much publicly, I think it's important to know that there are discussions going on, as we know that where time is getting closer to in which we should make them an offer or not for their property. Just a couple of schedule changes to let you know about that are worth noting. We were planning to do a joint council state legislative delegation meeting on January 6th. We could only get 2 of our 3 legislative team members there that night, so we have rescheduled that into February, and I believe we've got commitments from 2 of the 3 for that evening.
Yeah, session opens that day.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, on the 6th. So we've rescheduled, what I have done for that night is rescheduled Harry Brule to do my performance review in the closed session for the work session that night. So that's the subject change for that. We have had a bit of disappointing news that I'll tell you about on France Avenue. The signature lighting element that was should be up and lit right now is not coming anytime soon. There was some kind of miscommunication between the vendor and one of the subcontractors, and they tell us now they don't think they're going to get it up until shipped, actually, until late March of 2015. We have informed the vendor that we will be charging the liquidated damages penalty of $1,000 per calendar day for every date. This is after January 21st, so we'll see if that influences when they're delivered, because that's going to be fantastic. Mm-hmm. So that's on the way. The last thing I have for you, after a very busy year, as I was doing some of the planning for my annual performance review and just looking back at the amount of things that were done this year, it was substantial. A lot of good stuff. But one of the things that got done this year is symbolized by this. We are the proud owners of an old dry cleaner as of today. I met with Mr. and Mrs. Park today. They handed over the keys and the abstract for the property, and we own that property now. So, all right. That's all I have for you, Council Members Bennett and Sprague. On behalf of staff, we've got a card here for each of you. We want to tell you how much we're going to miss you and everything you've brought to being on the council. Going to miss you very much.
Thank you. Anyone else? Did that cause any further thought on an issue?
I did put some postcards around. Edina Morningside Rotary Club is celebrating its 25th anniversary with a hangar dinner and dance. And we have opportunities for flights in King Air airplanes that evening. It'll be great fun. So, so if you can join us, please do. We would love to share the evening with you. Right. The Rotary Club does a lot.
All right. We stand adjourned. Thanks again.